This breakthrough will change life as we know it. Why isn't anyone talking about this? Lab-grown organs, so no more needing to wait for a transplant. We're on the edge of designing lifelike software. Removing the transplant wait isn't even the great part. It'll be having replacement organs your immune system doesn't want to destroy. No more pills for the rest of your life. A Japanese team of researchers has recently, as in within the last 5 years, discovered our teeth only stop growing because of a molecule they're developing a med to eliminate, allowing you to regrow whole sets of teeth. There are issues such as not knowing how to reintroduce this stop mechanism, and the fact it would be a whole set at once with all of the same issues your first set of adult teeth had when they came in. Regardless, this could completely change how we approach dental health, medicine connected to it, and change public perception of altering or reactivating genes in ourselves for health or cosmetic purposes. There have been successful animal tests, and the most recent information I found was that they were beginning the process with human trials, which will take several years. If this is real, it could increase life expectancy. Lots of elderly people with dentures or poor dentition have trouble eating and then become malnourished, ultimately speeding up their death. I was just reading about advances in mRNA technology that could potentially reshape cancer treatment. The idea is doctors take a sample of cancer patients' cancer cells and tailor a custom vaccine to treat their specific form of the virus. It's the beginning of real tailored medicine, and it could be massively beneficial. It's happening with my dad right now. He has Merkel cell carcinoma. On Monday, they drew blood, concocted a potion of medicine tailored to his immune system, and then he had an infusion. He's going to do this 6 times over 12 weeks, and then apparently the cancer should either be small enough to remove or gone completely. Algae-based products will help cut down on plastic waste. They're already making edible water bottles using algae. Not to mention algae farming is going to revolutionize climate control. Update, to anyone that cares, they just made an algae plastic that can stand the pressures of Mars. So R&D is still ongoing with this in mind. Don't let the naysayers kill the dream. The cure for diabetes is always 5 years away, so we might lock up 2 or 3 cures for diabetes. Is it 5 years away? Or is this one of those ongoing, fusion tech is 10 to 15 years away claims? I think unless you're in the know, it's hard to be sure. Magnetic cooling is an emerging technology that uses the magnetocaloric effect to transfer heat, eliminating the need for compressors and harmful gases like CFCs and HFCs. It has the potential to be more energy efficient. Lab tests suggest up to 20 to 30% efficiency gains over traditional systems. While still in development, commercial applications could appear in the next 5 to 10 years. Replacing CFCs and HFCs would significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as these refrigerants have global warming potential thousands of times higher than CO2. Generic semaglutide. Once the patent expires and this med becomes cheaper, it'll be used more. This has been shown to be a treatment for obesity and addiction, as well as reducing risk of liver disease and neurodegenerative diseases. I went on semaglutide for weight loss, and I swear the impact it has had on my OCD has been so profound that if there were any way I could manage it without insurance, I'd continue taking it forever just for that. The weight loss effects were noticeable in the beginning, but petered out after about 6 months. The driving need to wash my hands until they bled, however, decreased to the point that I could touch things that didn't belong to me, even without gloves on a lot of the time. And my intrusive thoughts are practically a thing of the past in comparison to pre-semaglutide. If only it weren't so frickin' expensive. CRISPR and controlled gene editing. It can and likely will change everything from food production to immunization to potentially even designer babies. Male birth control. There's been various trials from the pill to a gel that can be injected that stops your swimmers and can be reversed. Are they calling it sunblock? Nanotech, particularly in health. I'm 46. I was raised by a mum and dad obsessed with science. I remember at about the age of 8 being shown an article by my mum about nanotechnology. We all thought it would solve everything. 39 years later, and we're still waiting. This is so common with science. You hear about some world-changing technology, treatment, or medication, and the next thing you know, 20 years have passed and you've never heard about it since. It's all about funds and results. You only get funds when you have results, but results can be hard to get without sufficient funds. I think it'll take longer than 10 to 15 years, but in the never-ending source for cheap labor, the world will turn its attention to Africa. Huge population, very low wages, rich in natural resources, and close to developed nations. The Chinese have been investing heavily in African infrastructure, like rails, roads, and ports. You'll see Africa become much more important on the global stage in the future. US AFCOM, the US military installations in Africa, spend $52 billion. I think everyone's planning on Africa becoming a huge part of the global future. The inability to discern between real and artificial intelligence, and between reality and fabrication, and the cultural acceptance of both as legitimate. The Elder Scrolls 6 in my lifetime, if I'm lucky. I think medically, we're going to see major breakthroughs with cancer, autoimmune, mental health, and weight. As someone who's had stage 4 bowel cancer, I think the research needs to be in early detection. If every cancer could be caught when it's only a few cells, then the survival rate would go through the roof. The release of The Winds of Winter by George R.R. Martin. Trust me, bro. You know, out of all the crap I've read here, yours is the least likely to happen. Massive population decline in Western countries. This will begin to seriously increase by around 2030. It'll lead to massive geopolitical changes over the next 50 years. The Accidental Superpower is a great book on this topic. Japan's already experiencing this. Not enough working-age people to balance the aging population. Land is losing fertility. It's going to be a real big problem worldwide within 15 years. Smart toilets that perform medical monitoring and tests on your excrement. The company that monitors that will sell your data to insurance companies. Mr. Smith, your fecal samples have had high percentages of oil in them for 3 weeks. Based on this information, we're elevating your risk category to a level 4B and raising your rates by 25%. The near death of the working and middle classes. The wealth divide is about to become grotesque. The death of the middle class, yes. Death of the working class, no. At least not in its size. Poor and middle class are both working class. There's really only the working class and the rich in the first place. All other distinctions are distractions to keep the working class from uniting against the rich. Social media turning everyone into brain-dead ghouls with a medieval level of understanding of the real world. I'm not convinced people's understanding of the world has notably decreased. We're just exposed to more people's very stupid opinions. Like people were dumb as crap in the 80s, they just didn't have a megaphone to shout their stupid out to the world. Stable nuclear fusion, of course. It was also 10 to 15 years away when I did a report on it in 1988. I didn't see it after a first scroll down, so the loss of effectiveness of antibiotics. Microplastics. We're either going to find out it's disastrous or no big deal. Personally hoping for the second option. Molten salt thorium reactors. However, they'll be in China, and the only way we'll get any for ourselves is if we buy them from China. We're so far behind on this technology that it would be a major effort to catch up. So sad, as we've had the ability to build test MSRs in the 50s. The anti-nuclear lobby has been one of the greatest setbacks and environmental disasters for the Western world, and we really should despise them more than the anti-vaxxers or flat earthers. The application of deep machine learning to atomic simulations. Essentially, we've had this program called density functional theory, which can solve multi-atomic quantum mechanic problems. It uses approximations, as without there literally isn't enough time that's passed in the universe to solve even just 100 atom systems with current computers. It does this with high enough accuracy to back out real material properties with very high accuracy. The issue is that even a few thousand atoms become extremely expensive. We're talking weeks to months on a supercomputer, and a lot of practical use cases, like how doping in semiconductors leads to different electric properties, can require more like hundreds of thousands of atoms to be realistically modeled. Machine learning allows for fast simulations to go to millions of atoms, to even hundreds of millions of atoms, allowing for even biological processes to be simulated on the atomic scale at near quantum mechanic accuracy. This will revolutionize all materials research and development, and lead to huge discoveries in many fields like computing hardware and medication discovery. Microsoft, Meta, IBM, and others have all invested heavily in this area, developing huge atomic simulation datasets. If only we could get them to make them public. Some of the other answers put here, like algae-based products, really better plastic alternatives in general, as algae will always have a throughput problem when considered on a global scale. Nanotech and so on will all be heavily impacted by the ability to simulate these technology-enabling materials on a computer in a high-throughput manner and then go after only the most promising candidates in the lab. Very biased, though, as this is literally one of the focuses of my PhD. Yes, this is what we should be utilizing AI for. To run thousands of simulations that would be nearly impossible with simple one-at-a-time human input. Sorry, I know I've been banging on about AI a lot lately, but it infuriates me more with each passing day. Two main technologies I can see making huge leaps, and if they take off, they'll change everything. Nuclear fusion energy generation. Test reactors have already been built and fired. China have sustained over 5 minutes so far, and other nations are building test facilities. Safe, cheap, clean energy with minimal dangerous waste. And 2, battery technology like graphene. Once battery technologies advance and the costs come down, I can see local power storage for renewable technologies, home power packs, EVs and stuff becoming much more cost-effective. They'd also be able to charge in half the time or less. Put the two together and you have clean, cheap energy which can be stored for peak shaving, later use, cars and all sorts. Vertical farming. As the cost of traditional farming increases and becomes less productive as weather becomes more warm and unpredictable, vertical farming's advantages with controlling the light and temperature will outweigh the current high initial cost and energy requirements. I'm an agricultural economist. People have been saying this for 30 or more years. It definitely has its place for leafy greens, but it's very energy sensitive and useless for row crops. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Millions of people will lose their jobs to AI, and we have no clear plan to replace what's being lost. The problem is we've created a society in which decreasing the amount of work we have to do is seen as a bad thing. That's messed up on a fundamental level. My album. It's gonna change everything. I'm taking pre-orders for 15 years later now. Extinction rates of birds, bugs, trees, and mammals. That new flying bike that looks like the speeder bikes from Star Wars seems pretty promising. Personally, I'm still waiting on my hoverboard from Back to the Future 2. In Western and developed countries, insufficient working age population. This is an imminent problem which will sharply affect the economies of major countries like South Korea, Japan, and Italy. The obvious answer is immigration, but that's being handled very poorly in most places. But aren't we also moving toward a time when most work will be automated and mechanized? Maybe it'll be a wash. Another, more deadly pandemic. Yay! Worldwide water shortages, priced like oil. Why isn't it more likely that diesel technology improves and becomes more cost-effective per gallon? Cultivated meat. Self-driving cars. Imagine eating your scrambled eggs or catching a power nap on a commute to work. Also imagine someone dying while driving. It happens more often than we talk about, and the car continues towards that final destination. Kids running out to the driveway being all, "Grandma's here, yay!" I mean, your funny joke aside, this will be devastating for the trucking industry. Trucking is one of the biggest employers in many areas, so wide-scale unemployment and whole swaths in the highway economy will be impacted. No more gas stations, roadside diners, or anything. Not enough people are talking about climate change. My hope? Extraterrestrial contact. My vision of reality? Crawling out of the devastation of World War III. I don't know, the both of them might have the same outcome. I don't know, man. I feel like the US needs to stop defunding research if we want life-saving medical treatments and breakthroughs. Neuralink just implanted a successful chip into someone with ALS who's non-verbal. And he's communicating now. So in the next 10 to 15 years, I think we're going to see a boom in communication with lots of people who are non-verbal. And I predict we're going to be able to cure or fix a lot of issues we could only guess about, simply because the people suffering can't express what they're feeling or thinking currently. The massive growth of the gap between the 1% and the rest of us. Wars, recessions, pandemics, all of them just accelerate it. The only answer historically seem to be things like the French Revolution. Money is power, and power rarely cedes power. The other coming out is America's shale oil industry and the end of the Bretton Woods era. America will be energy independent and will no longer protect global commerce on the seas. So we might see a massive global destabilization, recession, depression, regional wars over energy, and that the US is just fairly protected from all that due to energy and geographical isolation from Europe and Asia. Lots of arguing about this possible future, but it is a distinct possibility. Dead zones on the planet as a result of climate change. Yay! Brain-computer interfaces in 15 years. We might think a thought and send a message, learn skills instantly, or back up our memories. Neo-feudalism. We're all getting less and less powerful compared to the people on top, while we all fight about our gender identities. All of the LGBT plus people and allies that I know are well aware of neo-feudalism and are capably fighting for the first while battling the latter. It's the conservative bigots who are fussing over the identities of others at the expense of dealing with neo-feudalism. Global lack of fresh water will cause many wars around the world that will eventually erupt into the ultra-rich, destroying the ultra-poor. AI. While it's being talked about, the dangers are far more than people think. The thing is, with AI, you have nutjobs who think it's going to be like the Terminator. It'll be much worse. Not some evil thing that once you're gone, it's going to slowly and quietly phase a lot of people out of jobs. And it's already starting to happen. Aliens. This year's going to be the one, I can tell. Elder Scrolls 6 Trailer Remastered. Bedroom robots and the decline of the human population. Seriously, think about it. You'll have a robot who's exactly what you desire, will allow you to live whatever messed up fantasy life you want, no argument, no pushback, it only does what you want to do. To be clear, I don't think this will be all good. Having a spouse with checks and balances is a good thing, otherwise I'd have bought a boat a long time ago. The Ceres team have been collecting ERB data since 1997, when the first Ceres instrument was launched aboard the Tropical Rainfall Measuring Mission, or TRMM satellite. Since then, Ceres instruments have been launched aboard the Terra, Aqua, Sumi National Polar Orbiting Partnership, SNPP, and NOAA-20 satellites. The Ceres instruments provide direct measurements of reflected solar radiation and emissions of thermal infrared radiation to space across all wavelengths between the ultraviolet and far infrared. For the last 8 years, Ceres have found that the Earth is absorbing more energy each year. This is caused by the loss of ice cover due to climate change. Less and less ice is created each year, so less and less energy is reflected back into space. This acceleration cannot be stopped without disastrous consequences. Climate change is coming, and it's going to destroy the world's economy and kill hundreds of millions of people. There are areas in the US where insurance companies will not insure a house because of either the likelihood of storm damage or flooding or wildfires. In these areas, you can't get a mortgage because insurance is required for all mortgages. If you can't get a mortgage, you can't buy or sell the property, crashing the market. The banks that hold the mortgages in these areas are seeing a total loss of the properties they own, crashing the banking industry. The collapse of the economic system is happening now. Man, there have been some fun, uplifting things to read in this video. I hope that some of us use some of these terrifying prospects like class war, climate change, and the prospect of economic doom to inform our voting and general life choices going forward. Where we can afford to, of course. Lab-grown organs are becoming closer and closer to reality each day, and the progress made in this field has been tremendous. No longer having to search or find the perfect donor organ that you'd still need lifelong medication to keep your body from killing will be world-changing. Though I don't think we'll be getting full realistic limbs or anything like that in the near future, all of your organs might be on the table. I also think we're slowly approaching the revival of using certain substances that are branded as illegal back into psychotherapy. Molly being a big one. It was used throughout the 70s as a therapy aid and was taught to over 4,000 therapists, and was produced legally up until around 1985, though some of the producers turned it into a recreational substance. After that, it was made illegal, despite initial judges' rulings that it was fine to turn it into a regulated substance, and psychologists from places such as Harvard declaring that the substance had a clear medical use. In 2017, it was approved for the therapeutical treatment of PTSD, and this is just one example of certain substances that have been slowly coming back into the conversation of psychology and therapy. In the next 15, I expect them to become more widely used as decriminalization increases and stigma decreases. The collapse and restructuring of the world economy as we transition to a world where supply of and demand for workers diverges indefinitely. The bad? Food shortages due to climate change, unless we speed up vertical farming. The good? Nuclear fusion reactions and thorium salt reactors. AI is going to go into frickin' everything, and it's going to be as impactful as the internet itself, if not more. The tokamak reactor in France that's supposed to be done in 2035, I believe? It might change energy forever, or at the least open up more avenues to more efficient power. Probably already has. If it's supposed to be done in 2035, and you look at the accuracy of the past 25 years nuclear construction planning in France, you can safely say it won't be done until 2050. In 1970, it was fine to get a degree and your knowledge would be relevant until the moment you retired. This is changing, and changing fast. The myth that a degree is something that guarantees you a job will soon become obvious, and the only thing employees will look for is the skill of self-learning. This will make degrees even less relevant. Even now, people question whether they should pursue a degree or study of their own. In the future, this trend is expected to skyrocket, and we'll see a generation of entirely self-taught people, which is scary. Fascism. We'll have so much more technology to be oppressed with. If phage therapy doesn't gain more traction and reckless prescribing continues, all of our antibiotics will become completely useless. I watched a YouTube video recently where a guy tested out a commercially acquired powered mobility exoskeleton. He tested it hiking, running, walking, and cycling. All forms were dramatically improved by the exoskeleton. Not only will this help with the elderly and their mobility issues, but I'm guessing it'll help factory workers work longer hours with less strain on their bodies. Think Death Stranding, but in an Amazon warehouse. I mean, it's dystopian, but fascinating. What major injustice are you still salty about years later? In a 5th grade science test, the question was, are there any stars in the solar system? I answered, yes. The teacher marked it wrong. I went up afterwards and said, what about the sun? He said he meant all the other stars aren't in our solar system, and he kept it marked wrong. Although I'm harboring this for 50 years now, he was all around one of the best teachers I've ever had, and just passed away a week or so ago. But damn, that should have been marked right. When I was in high school, someone tagged up the school. They announced there'd be a reward for anyone who rats anyone else out. I got called in the office and found out I was suspended for vandalization. I didn't do it and I had no idea who. 4 days later, I'm allowed to come back to school because they found out who actually did it. I just got an apology. Me and some others in primary school were saying the biggest numbers we knew of. Everyone was saying like 100,000 and 1,000,000, and then I'm like 1,000,000,000,000, and they refused to believe it was a real number. On a 4th grade math test, we had to make a shape that had only 4 sides, 1 set of parallel lines, and only 1 right angle. There were probably more requirements, but I can't remember. I remember almost crying at my desk and spending 20 minutes on that one question while constantly telling my teacher that it wasn't possible, but according to her it was. And the next day we went over the answer key, and the answer had 2 right angles. When I was in high school, I was occasionally allowed to drive my family's 3rd car. It had a slow leak in one of the tires, so we were all supposed to check the pressure and put air in it if we needed to. I picked up a friend to go to a movie, and when we came out, one tire was completely flat. It wasn't the one with the leak, so I put the spare on and I drove home. I got absolute hell from my parents about it. How irresponsible I was not to check it, that I'd have to pay for the repair, why hadn't I called roadside assistance, yada yada yada. Took it to get it fixed, got the whole lecture again as we're dropping it off, and the tech who did it called my mum and told her he'd found a nail in the tire and there was no way I could have seen it coming. She refused to apologize and I still had to pay for it. The good old shut up, I'm an adult and I can't be wrong approach. Jading children and making them lose trust in adults since the dawn of humanity. Come on guys, be good role models and show people how to gracefully accept when they're wrong. Being charged $1,000 for a battery and alternator change. They also destroyed my starter motor in the process and rounded a bunch of my bolts. They left tools in the engine bay. I don't even have that car anymore and I'm still salty. Screw you, Midas. 3 months ago, I went on maternity leave. The woman hired to cover for me was being paid $3 more than I'm currently paid. She was going to be kept on as a full-time accounting assistant after I returned, but she couldn't keep up with my daily tasks and completely effed up several databases that I had to correct when I returned to work the following month. When I returned for a raise, they offered me a 50-cent raise after telling me how crucial I was to the structure of the company. Needless to say, I'm looking for a new job. I live in the EU and English is my second language. In 4th grade English class, I used the word gross, as in disgusting, in a random sentence we had to write. The teacher argued that it isn't a real word. I said that it was, that I saw it a few times in video games and movies, and she said that those aren't a reliable source. I said to her that I'm going to show it in the dictionary, but instead she grabbed me by the arm and took me out of the classroom and locked the door. To this day, I'm still fuming about this. And then she had the nerve to be all chummy when I met her once in the supermarket. Gross. 20 years ago, I had 3 friends show up at my house, and when they left, my wallet with $80 in it was missing. One of the guys felt bad and gave me $20 back. 3 years after that, we were in the Burger King drive-thru, and he whipped out my wallet. I'm still salty. His Facebook friend request has just been sitting there for like 2 years. I came second in a food tech competition. I made a lovely main course, then longue shot biscuits with lemon posset for dessert. I made this dessert because the judges prior to this day had told us, don't make a cake for dessert. Guess what won first place? A frickin' cake. One time, my high school music chamber orchestra participated in a music competition. We worked our tails off learning Shostakovich's Quartet No. 8, which, if you don't know, is crazy hard to play, not least because it includes a certain musical dissonance that doesn't come naturally to people. And we seriously nailed it. We showed up to the competition only to discover that nearly everybody else had chosen easier, more melodic pieces, with a solid third of all of them playing Tchaikovsky's Serenade for strings. Not only did we not win any of the top spots, several of which went to people playing that damn Tchaikovsky, but our judges were writing notes about how the music sounded evil. Seriously, who marks down a chamber orchestra because you think the composer wrote evil music? Imbeciles. I was probably 5 years old visiting my mum at the hospital after she gave birth to my brother, and she was given food on a tray which she didn't want, so she gave it to me. I put the tray on the table, and as I was eating, the nurse took the tray away from me and threw away the food. That may have been my first true instance of anger in my life. I'm 27 now, and I am shaking mad as I write this. Our wedding photographer left part of their lens cap on, so every photo is shrouded in a massive black ring. No good photos from the wedding. I found a bongo next to the trash at my old apartment, and it was a perfect time capsule of the 90s. It had Grateful Dead stickers, a smiley face holographic sticker, a pot leaf sticker, and an alien. I'm telling you, if someone made this as a prop for a movie about the 90s, I would have told them that it's too on the nose. When I came home from work, the first thing my girlfriend's friend said was, "You're welcome," and I was like, what? She had peeled off all of the vintage stickers, and now it was just a boring trash bongo. I'm still mad. Don't touch my crap. My copyright law teacher gave us a case for our pass or fail final exam. I solved the case, we needed to predict the outcome based on evidence, and he failed me. Later that day, I decided to look the case up, and it turns out I was right. When I confronted him, he said the grade was already posted, and even though I was right, he wouldn't do anything about it. I had to retake the class. When my mum put my sister's name on my birthday cake. Later that night, I also walked into my parents getting their freak on. Pretty horrible way to turn 13. I'm still angry. When I was a freshman in college, my mum gave my car to my jailbird brother. Every time he got out, she'd scrape a bunch of stuff together for his fresh start. And she never even ran it by me. He showed up to my school, changed the battery for me, and then drove away in it. He didn't tell me his intentions beforehand, so it wasn't until then that I caught on. As he drove off, I called my mum and she just said, "I'll help you with a new one." He moved out of state with that car, wrecked it within weeks, and has since gone back to jail multiple times. Neither of them have given me a sincere apology to this day. That my 6th grade teacher refused to believe that I had no idea the guy sitting behind me was copying my answers on the test. My father died in a very bad vehicle rollover a few years ago. I wasn't allowed near his vehicle in the tow yard until the cops finished their investigation. That took about 2 weeks. This entire time, the F-wad owner of the yard was charging by the day from day one for storage of said rack even during the investigation. Was never allowed to thoroughly search his vehicle for the lost heirlooms I believe the tow truck driver might have stolen. The first day of 8th grade, my best friend and friend group informed me that they'd no longer be my friends. To this day, 20 years later, I still don't understand how or why things ended up that way. I can only guess because I was the shy nerd of the group and they were trying to fit in with the cool crowd. Regardless, it was a miserable experience that left me with quite a few trust issues. Well, if there's any justice in the world, then maybe their friends did that to them too. In fact, if they were that shallow and crappy, there's a good chance they were unable to maintain any meaningful friendships at all without a serious amount of personal growth. If they've become better people since then, they'll probably still feel bad about what they did. Kindergarten. Playing with a kid in the sandbox. was a fairly drizzly day. We're making a castle and there's a puddle a few feet from us. He wants to dig a moat around the castle and I say, sure. So he just kind of jams his hand in the dirt and starts pulling, making way too large of a channel which he immediately realizes is going to just destroy our castle. So I say, quickly, build a dam to stop the water. He freezes, stares at me with wide eyes and a mouth agape before running off. I think this is a strange occurrence, but okay, whatever. I saved the castle, so then I went back to digging when the teacher runs up and grabs me and says to go to timeout, to which I obviously protest and say, no, what the frick, I didn't do anything. She then immediately says she knows I said a bad word and to not try and lie about it, to which I am again confused and say I didn't. After a few back and forths of her trying to pull me away by the arm and me rather violently resisting, it occurs to her to actually ask me what happened. I explain the story. I still remember her face kind of dropping, realizing the other little crap bag thought I said D-A-M-N instead of D-A-M, and then immediately ratting on me. Tries to say, well, maybe use a different word, to which again I vehemently protest against, because no, that's the correct word for such a situation, and that's just how it works, and it's his fault for not knowing the word, until she finally gives in and explains to the kid that I didn't swear and that nobody likes a tattletale. I am in my 30s and on the other side of the country, and I still remember this as the very instance in which I gazed upon my fellow man and wept, for he is stupid. So my mum and dad got divorced before I was 1, and he'd randomly come around once every few years to pretend to be a dad for a week or two and then disappear again. This is important for the story. Anyway, I've always sucked at and hated math. We got a homework assignment, I think I was in the 1st grade, and we were working on 0 times whatever number. I was excited because I understood it, and I knew I'd get all the questions right. The whole worksheet was just questions asking what 0 times another number was. My father made me show him the worksheet when I was finished and then made me change every damn answer because, wow, you're stupid. Did you pay attention at all in class? And I explained to the teacher when I'd turned it in, and I still got a fricking 0. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Coming second in a school trivia competition 21 years ago. I had the correct answer on 2 questions that would have sent us to the national champs, and I was vetoed by the other 3 idiots on my team. That hits hard. I was a co-founder of a startup, and during an early strategy meeting, I made a bunch of suggestions that the other founders aggressively dismissed. A year later, we got some funding and hired a CEO who was an expert in the field, and he suggested the exact same things, which they praised as brilliant. They later sheepishly remembered that I'd suggested the same ideas and apologized. That really taught me a lot. Being right is rarely enough. You need to understand why you're right, and you have to be able to sell your ideas. When I got my first car, a really old one, my dad told me I'd be responsible for gas money and that he'd take care of the maintenance. After a while, my brakes would make funny noises and I told my dad. I reminded him every once in a week, maybe for half a year, and he always told me, yeah, I got it, I'll handle it. My boyfriend at this time wouldn't let me drive it any further because he was concerned for my safety. So he, my boyfriend, had a mechanic look at it. The mechanic told me that if I'd have come sooner, it would have been a $50 bill to take care of it. But over time, the brake got more and more damaged, and by then it would have been over $800 for the repair. When I told my dad, he just said that there was no way he'd spend so much money on a car that had maybe $500 in value left. I ended up selling my car for scrap. That was 10 years ago, and I still bring it up to my dad sometimes. If he would have ever just done something when I first told him, it would have been so cheap and easy. When I was about 8 or 9, we had a big project in school which ended with us writing a story. I spent frickin' hours on this thing. It was going to be the best book ever. It was only a matter of time before it was snapped up by some publisher, and then it would be the talk of the Scholastic Book Fair. No doubt in my mind. It absolutely had to be in by the time school finished for Christmas, so my teacher could mark it over the break. So I stayed up until about 10 o'clock at night for about a week beforehand working on it. Which, you know, is the closest thing you get to an all-nighter when you're about 9. It was my magnum opus. I just got back into school in January to find out that A, she had lost it, and B, she was accusing me of not handing it in, and C, because mine was the only one she couldn't find, she decided to call me out in front of the class about it. I ended up locking myself in the toilet because I was crying so much. Worse still, it later transpired that when it turned up after all, she marked it as though it was handed in late and the witch still only gave me a middling grade. Screw you, Mrs. Harding. Screw that teacher. In a similar vein, when I was 17 in high school, I was dreaming of becoming a published author one day. I'd always enjoyed storytelling, and I'd always make a special effort to do well in school when it came to creative writing. At some point during the year, our professor asked us to write him a short story of about 1,000 words. I was very excited because I had tremendous respect for that man and I loved his classes. I really wanted to impress him. I wrote a sci-fi short story that involved an ice planetoid turning into a digging site for underground resources. Workers lived in stacked boxes of apartments and traveled in spheres, shooting through a network of large above-ground tubes. The plot involved the protagonist uncovering an artificial structure under the ice, then immediately being fired and sent back to Earth in a single-person shuttle. It was strongly implied that the single-person shuttle was just a way to dispose of workers who knew too much about what the corporation was really digging for. Anyway, it wasn't very good, probably a little derivative. I did consume a lot of sci-fi books and movies and games and things, and it was nothing more than you'd expect from your average 17-year-old. But the professor handed it back to me without even having marked it, asking me to turn in another one on a very short notice, this time without plagiarizing from some popular novel. I told him I didn't. I asked what book he thought I plagiarized, because if a book told that story, I honestly want to read it. I swore the story was purely my own. I even admitted that I was likely influenced by a lot of things, but I still came up with that one organically. He'd never heard my plea, never even named the book or gave me more of a reason why he thought so poorly of my work. I lost a lot of respect for him and a lot of interest in his classes after that. I'm still cranky about it, and it's been over 20 years. I ended up becoming a teacher myself, and the memory helped me remember to never dismiss my students' creativity and always nurture their ideas. I also ended up quitting last year to focus on writing, and I'm now a published writer. I'm somewhat broke, that comes with starting out I guess, but I'm happier than I've ever been. Okay, well, good on you for cutting off my curse-laden rant about how bad teachers are stunting young creatives with their unfairness. That last post as professor not even trying to provide proof of your plagiarization is peak unfairness. If he really believed that, all he had to do was put a few of the sentences into Google, and if you'd ripped it directly, it would have come up. I was at a house party in college and we'd taken off our shoes. Some idiot walked home in my leather-high knee boots and I've never gotten over it. For clarity, she left her dirty, cheap plastic heels behind for me to go home with, so thanks I guess, you shoe-thieving wrench. When I was in high school, I entered a book quiz and one of the books I chose was Demon Thief by Darren Shan. During the quiz, I was asked what was the main characteristic of the demonata summoned by the punk during the concert. I said it had 3 heads. Wrong. The answer was that it had a dyed mohawk. Except it was the punk that summoned it that had the mohawk, not the damned demonata. I lost a point because the question setter could either not read, not write, or couldn't remember the book correctly. When my old boss pulled out the 2020 calendar in late 2019 and asked everyone what days off they need so we can plan ahead and around. Everyone was spitting off dates. I didn't have any plans yet, so I didn't request anything until she specifically asked me if I needed or wanted any dates off. I shrugged and asked for 1 day around my birthday because why not? And she started mocking me in front of everyone. It's just a 23rd birthday, why would you need that off? But okay, obviously rolling her eyes and then started treating me like an idiot for the rest of the day. Ugh. I had a friend in college borrow my truck when I flew home for a month, 1,500 miles away. He agreed to the terms of don't cross state lines, you only drive it to work and back, and if I find out you did otherwise, it's going to be a big deal. I hadn't even been home a week and I got a call from a group of friends that he had taken the truck down to Connecticut, drove drunk, road raged at someone on the highway, and love-tapped the back end of their car. The kicker was that he backed into his buddy's dad's brand new Lexus and caused $3,000 worth of damage. Needless to say, I flew home the next day. When confronted about it, he basically said, "I don't have the money, it's your problem," in front of one of my friends who had picked me up from the airport. That friend had to hold me back. So, I have my mother, the insurance company, and the Lexus guy's dad all climbing down my throat to get me to fix the problem. The dad with the Lexus called me to say he was going to file a police report if I didn't pay. My mother was screaming about the insurance company dropping me. I went to school the next day, got back, and he had vanished. Cleaned out a bunch of crap from the apartment. Stole everybody's things. The one thing that still makes my blood boil is the fact that one of my good friends that lived with us will vehemently back up that crap bag anytime it's brought up. I understand that he didn't screw him over, but just denying it and saying that I need to let bygones be bygones is just something I can't do. In elementary school, there was a pencil machine in the front of the lobby where you could get pencils for 25 cents. There were also special pencils that had stars on them. If you got one of these special pencils, you could take it into the office and get a prize. One day, I decided to get a pencil. I put in my quarter and out popped 2 pencils. And one of them was a special pencil. I went into the office and told the lady at the desk that the machine gave me 2 pencils and one of them was special. She proceeded to say that the machine shouldn't do that, took the special pencil, and didn't give me a prize. That was 19 years ago, and I am still mad. People like this is why we lie. I missed out on recognition at my school's big academic assembly for arguably the most important academic results one gets in their schooling career, in my state in Australia anyway. I missed out because the teacher I'd sent my results to didn't pass on the news. It's been years and it still fills me with such exasperation. When my son was in Cub Scouts and it was our first time going to the Pinewood Derby, my son worked hard on his car, and for a 7-year-old, it was decent. We show up and not a single kid built those cars. It was pretty much a dad competition. My son came in dead last and I was sad for him because his friends literally said that their dads all built their cars. So for the next 4 years, my son picked the design and color scheme and I built them while at work. We went on a 4-year winning streak in the local, district, and regional derbies. The look of anguish on those fathers' faces was worth it. Sorry, end of rant. Some friends from work planned a get-together at a local chain restaurant for my birthday. One of my co-workers found out and decided that it should also be to celebrate her birthday because it's the day before mine. Already annoyed, but whatever. The night of the dinner, a friend bought us both slices of cheesecake, and they were presented with candles and everyone sang happy birthday. At the end, she blew out her candle, and then mine, and then laughed about it. That was my candle. You were barely invited. I've never forgotten about that. Ugh. What little trick to make life easier can you not believe actually worked? Tapping a stuck jar lid with the blunt side of a butter knife all around the edges loosens it enough to open it most of the time. I had really bad vertigo when I rolled over for like a month out of nowhere. I'd roll over and it felt like I was still rolling for a good 20 seconds. I eventually looked up some YouTube video on it. I didn't expect much, but one video told me to lie on my back on the bed and lean my head off the bed as far as it could go back, then hold for 10 seconds, then move my head up to even level for 10 seconds, and finally bring my head up so that my chin is pushed into my neck, all while laying on my back still. Hold it for 10 seconds each time. I felt really sick afterwards for like 30 minutes, but after that, my vertigo was completely cured. If you're having trouble passing gas, get down on all fours. Start with knees and hands, and then knees and elbows. I learned it from a dating survival handbook from the early 2000s, and it saved me the first time I had White Castle on a business trip. Someone posted on the internet a long time ago that in some older cars, turning your key in the lock on the door and holding it in the unlocked part for 3 seconds will unlock all the doors in the car. This trick works on my car, and since my key dongle doesn't work, it's changed my life. Contact solution works wonders on bloodstains. Kind of niche, but I work as a production tech. One of the companies I work with has a few HOG lighting consoles. These consoles sometimes don't want to boot up, and when I found myself in that situation, my coworker said, "Pick it up about 6 to 10 inches and just drop it." I looked at him like he was crazy because these things are expensive, and he calmly says, "Just do it." So I did it, and frick-a-duck, wouldn't you know it, it worked. And it continues to work with every HOG I come across. And yes, I've heard of percussive maintenance, however I never thought of using gravity to induce it. I love that it's so widely accepted. And to all of you saying that you're going to try this with your grandmas, from what I've told, that will kill. Please percussive maintain responsibly and don't kill your grandmas. Cursing loudly makes some automated answering machines immediately go to customer service. I personally recommend the F word, but the B word, S word, and C word also work as well. I wonder if this is because the AI just doesn't want to deal with that level of aggression in its day-to-day life, and decides that maybe only the humans who created it deserve to deal with all the nastiness that can spew forth from the human mouth. Laying on your left side can stop gastric reflux pain. I got a medicine wedge pillow that allows me to sleep comfortably on my side and inclined. It's helped me alleviate my reflux symptoms immensely. If you spill candle wax on a carpet, you can get it out by running an iron over it with a damp towel in between. I was so baffled I almost felt like spilling more wax. Low heat, make sure the towel is damp enough and keep the iron constantly moving. And most importantly, don't blame me if you light your carpet on fire. And please, just Google it first. Step 1 is actually to use a butter knife to get the big clumps out, and there's a few other disclaimers. I was told to put my hand on the bottom of the steering wheel when backing a trailer up, because then whichever direction you move your hand, that's the way the trailer goes instead of the opposite if your hand is on top. Oh my god, I desperately wish I'd known this earlier. I had an incredibly embarrassing 16-passenger van with the U-Haul trailer attached backing up situation that still haunts me to this day. If I'd just known that, ugh. Nuke a couple of potatoes and put them in your coat pockets. Aluminium foil cover optional. Voila! Hand warmers that stay warm for hours. As a bonus, you can eat them later. Aluminium foil hat optional. That Dawn dish soap and vinegar cleaner really does work miracles. My shower has a tendency to get this grimy coating that doesn't scrub off easily. Using Dawn and vinegar, it comes right off no problem. Had a parasitic drain on a truck and the fuse and relay panel was way up under the dash. I figured whatever was causing the drain would probably make the fuse and relay hot, so I shot the infrared thermometer at them all. And sure enough, one of them was 15 degrees hotter. Turns out the clutch for the AC compressor was stuck on the whole time. If you want to save some money on these types of problems, go to Harbor or Freight or Princess Auto and buy a $20 multimeter. Spend an hour on YouTube learning how to use it, and you'll be surprised how simple a lot of these problems are to solve. I had really bad hiccups from drinking, so the bartender gave me limes with sugar and some sort of red liquid on them, and they instantly went away. And I felt like I had control over my life for a very short, sweet moment. I'm guessing the red stuff was bitters. I do it with a lemon, though, not lime. My source? I'm a bartender. Listening to a song while reading along to the lyrics after it's been in my head all day to try and get it out. I don't even know how many times this has saved my sanity. The whole reading along thing is just a way to say concentrating on the lyrics and tune, as that's what makes the trick work. Don't know how it goes for an instrumental. I guess just imagine it's the background track for your life and roll with it. I don't know. Sometimes you're just screwed in the ear by life. Pressing your thumb to the roof of your mouth and pressing your other thumb in between your eyebrows when you have a headache. It works for some people, me being one of them. I read in a tween magazine, it might have been American Girl or something similar, years and years ago, a tip to help you fall asleep, where you slowly tense all of your muscles as much as you can, and then release all the tension at once. I was amazed at how much more relaxed I felt when I tried it. Years later, I realized this was basically mimicking what happens when you climax, without doing the deed with someone. So take that as you will, but hey, it works either way. Wearing thinner socks stopped me from getting blisters in my new shoes, which were a little big for me. I told my sister that my new shoes were giving me blisters, and she looked at my feet and very matter-of-factly said, "It's the socks. Too thick." Kinda like that scene in Road to El Dorado. Anyway, I was like, no, that's just some old wifey crap. But it worked. Use a used dryer sheet to remove deodorant stains. Gently stuffing a chicken's head under its wing and moving it in a circle exactly 3 times makes the chicken fall asleep. When I was a kid, I'd lay one of my chickens on its side while gently holding them in place and slowly drag my finger on the ground back and forth in front of their face. I'd let them go and they'd just lay there, not moving for a good minute. Then they'd wake up and go back to their chickeny business. 1 cup of vinegar, 1 cup original Listerine, 1 cup of warm water. Let your feet soak for around 30 minutes and then remove the dead skin. Bam! No more cracked feet. I did this with a couple of friends and our feet were so soft. They were also stained blue. To be fair, I can't remember what kind of mouth rinse we used, but our soft, lovely feet were Smurf blue afterwards. If you think that's cool, try a baby foot soak sometime. Your dead skin peels off like a week later. It's gross and really satisfying at the same time. If your nose is stuffy and you can't get it cleared, just do 10 push-ups and it will clear right up. You can blow your nose over and over, but for some reason, this actually does a better job of clearing it up. I had no idea how it could work at first, so I was skeptical, but somehow it genuinely does. Bold of you to assume I can do 10 push-ups. Well, that's actually how it works. In the 2.5 weeks it takes you to get to 10 actual push-ups, the cold will be over. And for you sickly people out there, a great excuse to work on getting that little bump of exercise into your daily lives. Not just working on those arms, but building in a nice little preventative measure for future colds. Cleaning your headlights with cheap baking soda toothpaste. I hadn't cleaned mine in 10 years. They cleaned up sparkling like new with almost no effort. When I was a little kid, I was playing in my dad's office while he was in a meeting and was drawing dinosaurs on his dry erase board. Unfortunately, I was using permanent marker and I got so scared I'd get in trouble, I cried. His secretary heard the commotion and was nice enough to show me that if you draw over the lines with a dry erase marker, it'll come off when you erase it. She was also nice enough to take me to the bakery across the street and get me a cookie. I was really skeptical about getting the garlic smell off my hands with stainless steel, but I tried it and it worked. Also, freeze onions for about 15 minutes before chopping them up, and it helps reduce the onion fumes. Writing down my goals actually does help me get them done more often. If you smoke too much Mary J or overdo it with edibles and are feeling too high, chew on a peppercorn and let it sit under your tongue for a minute. You'll feel fine in less than 5 minutes. If you're on edibles though, you might have to repeat this every 30 minutes to an hour up until you've metabolized all of the THC. You can also just smell some ground pepper, but it takes a bit longer and doesn't last as long. This works because a substance in black pepper called piperine blocks all the receptors that help you take in Mary J. If your car has a dent, pour boiling water on it and then use a toilet plunger to pop it back into place. I saw that one on Reddit a while back. A hairdryer also works for providing the heat. And you can use a marital aid that has a suction cup if you don't have a plunger. Turning electronics off and then on again magically fixes many problems. Pouring hot water on the remaining wax on finished candles. The wax melts and floats to the top so you can just reach in and take it out, and your candle jar is clean to be repurposed or recycled. Sounds simple, but as an avid candle burner, it's changed my life. If you smile, ask questions, do your work competently, and maintain a generally positive outlook on life and temper your critical edge, people will actually like you. Also, if you ask for help or advice with things, people feel a larger sense of connection with you. Obviously, this can become annoying when used too often, but in small doses, it leaves a person feeling invested in you. You mean if I'm not a beehole, then people will like me because I'm not a beehole? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Apparently, squatting does make it easier for you to go number 2. But if actual squat toilets are too weird or gross or inconvenient for you, you get the same effect by putting a footstool in front of a normal toilet and leaning forward while taking a dump. You don't have to buy a squatty potty, a regular stool, pun intended, works just fine. If you want to know if the egg is boiled, spin it on a table and stop it with your hand for just a short moment, then let it go again immediately. If it stops, it's boiled. If it keeps rotating, it's raw. The liquid inside has momentum. When you're doing a spot the difference challenge and the two pictures are next to each other, you can cross your eyes to merge the two images and the differences will sort of flash. It's hard to explain, but give it a go. If your printer seems broken, hit it and it will work again. I've been there, it's called percussive maintenance. I'm always too hot when I try to fall asleep, but I can't sleep with open windows in the winter. So I keep a couple of oranges frozen outside the window and I just toss one into my bed. It's a nighttime snack and it keeps me cool without having to get up out of bed. Win-win unless you fall asleep and crush the orange, but at least you got some sleep, so that's still kind of a win. I never expected this answer to get so much traction, or I'd have made it clearer, so I guess I'll edit in some answers to the most common questions. First, I rarely eat them before sleep. It's either breakfast or a snack if I wake up at like 3 a.m. My teeth are fine, thank you for asking. Ice packs would work as well, but then you can't eat them and it doesn't feel as natural. Fans work, but I have a bad habit of ruining them. It's not as good as under-blanket cooling anyway. I like to keep them in my armpits, but not always. Sometimes they just roll around in the bed. Sometimes I put one on my belly button and pretend I'm a giant teeing up my ball for a galactic game of golf. I'm almost certainly a human, I think, and I'm single and ready to mingle, baby. Propping up a cheek a bit to fart silently. You can point your camera, any camera, at an IR controller or accessory to check whether it works or not, because the camera can see infrared. Using a credit card to open a locked door. I'd locked my girlfriend and I out of her apartment by pulling the locked door shut behind us and leaving without the key. When we returned and realized what we'd done, I was able to slide the card in between the door and the door jamb and push back the bolt, opening the door. I scored major points with the missus, but we were both alarmed with how easy it was. Needless to say, we used the deadbolt when leaving the apartment from then on. If you need to cut some PVC pipe and you have no tools, you can cut the pipe with just some string and some friction. Ugh, my most popular comment, and it was a trick that my mentor and arch nemesis taught me. Damn you, Ronnie! Look guys, the tip here is all well and good and it seems to be valid, but I think the real reason I had to post this here is the intrigue. Who the hell is Ronnie and what did he do? What prompted the switch in your respective positions from student and master to bitter enemies? There's a story here, damn it, and you can't just leave us all with blue swollen mansacks like this. Crying because you're sad actually helps things. Sometimes people just need to cry to calm down. My daughter, who's 6, was crying because we broke a random rock open that she found and it wasn't a geode. She was so upset. Being a dad, I let her know that geodes are really hard to find and crying won't help anything. And she cries too much over things and crying won't make it turn into a geode. I know, I sound like a jerk when I write it out like this. Then she told me that crying does help her feel better if she's sad and that's why she cries sometimes. That hurt my heart that I'd been telling her not to cry when something helps her feel better. I don't tell her that anymore and I just let her snuggle up and cry as much as she wants. Even though crying doesn't help me, it might help others. Let your kids cry when they feel it. Those garlic peeling things. I thought for sure they were a dumb gimmick, but I used one in a cooking class and hot damn, it really did work like magic. It's so easy, I'm actually able to get the same effect using a rubbery jar opener thing that I already own, so I didn't even have to buy one of the official ones. Asking my wife to marry me. Worked like a charm. When your car overheats, turn up your heaters to full blast while driving, like roll the windows down if it's summertime so you don't bake. It helps keep your engine cooler than it would do otherwise, until you get to a safe spot to stop or to a nearby repair shop. After I broke up with my ex, about 2 weeks afterwards, my radiator busted and I didn't know who to call for help. So I ate crow and called him because he knew a few things about cars. Yet at the same time I was skeptical because he had a reason to give me horrible advice and screw me over. Lucky for me, he was a good guy and his advice saved my car. I get horrible morning sickness during the first half of pregnancy. One of the biggest struggles is staying hydrated. I try to eat or drink anything and it just comes right back up. Hence the dehydration. However, this is my 3rd time through, and I just figured out that if I wake up in the middle of the night that my nausea is greatly reduced and I can drink water. It might not sound like much, but if you've been dehydrated before, then you know how wonderful it is to drink something. I basically can't drink anything all day long, but I've trained myself to wake up and take a gulp of water every time I toss or turn throughout the night. It's been such a game changer, and while I'm still sick, at least I'm not dehydrated. If you want an NBA League Pass, you can use a VPN so it appears like you're in India and buy it for about $20. Apple cider vinegar and warts. Just take a Q-tip end and soak it in ACV, then place it over the wart and put a Band-Aid on top. Continue the process each night until it's gone. I had to deal with some earlier in my life and no amount of freezing helped. They'd die, but they always seemed to come back and return. Apple cider vinegar worked flawlessly and they never returned. That worked for me. I had one on my finger and my GP froze it 3 times. It was still there. She sent me to a dermatologist who injected it with a small amount of Candida fungus to try and get my immune system to kick in and get rid of it. Nothing. It was there for 2 years. I finally started soaking a cotton ball in ACV and using a Band-Aid to hold it while I slept. During the night it would burn, so I'd take it off. I'd also use my electric callus remover on it every day to scrape the dead skin off. Took about a month, but it worked and never came back. My mum loves to collect containers and store random crap, and also converted me to do the same. Both of us were stumped on how to get rid of the adhesive leftover from labels. I went online and found a post that said a mixture of olive oil and baking soda would take the glue right off. I kind of laughed at it, thinking it was another joke post, because how can baking soda and oil, two items we consume every day, be used to remove something like adhesives? Still, there was no real alternative since neither of us wanted to go buy Goo Gone because of the stench, so we tried the mixture out. To our surprise, it worked like a charm, and all of the adhesive and sticker residue came right off after letting the mixture sit on the containers for a bit. Now we have drawers full of containers, full of various spices and tools that once held other spices, snacks, and foods. Holding the car remote to your chin for better contact, like locking and unlocking and alarm. I thought my friend wanted me to look like an idiot, but the trick actually works. Flipping over a rug upside down before vacuuming the back of it. Doing this knocks out the dirt that's deep inside that the vacuum cleaner could never get out. If a bathroom stall lock won't shut right, you can stuff toilet paper in the other end and it will stay closed. The light for my husband's car rear license plate is kind of busted. We were actually pulled over once for that. When that happened, he asked the officer to check it out for himself and was allowed. He got out, went to the back of the car, and literally Fonzied it by hitting the car, and the light just turned on. The officer was like, "Well, okay then," and we were on our way. I think the cop was just bored and lonely. The ring toss at the fair. Don't just sling them or toss them towards the bottles in the hopes that you'll snag one. Gently toss them flat up into the air above the bottles and try to get it to fall flat. Hopefully I'm describing this correctly, because the first year I tried this at the fair, I won an electric guitar and a mini-amp. The following year, I won a $300 bike. Haven't been to the fair since, but you can bet your butt that I'll play it again the next chance I get. I genuinely have no idea if this person is onto something, incredibly lucky, or both. Surely if there were one good tactic, and you could reliably win great prizes with it, then the game just wouldn't exist at fairs. Let me know if this is indeed the winning tactic, because fairs just don't happen in my area, so there's no joy in my life. Equal parts Mountain Dew and Blue Powerade. Enjoy your homemade Bayer Blast. I work with children, and there's a lot of things they don't like to do but needs to get done. Often the phrasing of what needs to happen can do the trick, such as, "I know you don't like Brussels sprouts, so would you like carrots or green beans?" Or, "Would you want to eat 6 pieces of broccoli or 3 to go with your chicken?" Wherein the answer is the question and there's no opting out of the vegetables, but it seems like they get to pick the least horrible option. Want to know if a battery is full or empty of charge? Drop it straight down onto a table. If it bounces, then it's empty. If it drops and lands without bouncing, it's full. My girlfriend has trouble making decisions on small things, like the classic where to eat tonight. One time I figured out that since she can't decide among the available options, it must mean that all of those options make no difference to her. Therefore, I can just pick the one I want, or even at random, right? It worked. She loved it. I loved it. Everyone's happy. What terrible decisions did you make while you were mad, and how did it play out? Telling a judge, "Whatever, screw this court and the city of Richmond." The consequences? 30 days in jail for a contempt of court charge. I regretted that one. I punched a cop in the nose and broke it. It was instinctual after having a frickin' horrible day coupled with some creepy mother effer following me around for 4 blocks. I thought it was the creeper, not the cop, that I hit, when I felt a heavy hand on my shoulder. The cop was freaking out on the ground and his partner pulled his weapon on me, yelling to put my hands up. I had to explain why that mistake happened. It worked out okay, but I had to go to the police station to explain my story. Found out the cop was about to ask me if I'd noticed that my wallet was about to fall out of my pocket. It all ends with the broken-nosed cop saying it was okay and that I'd be let go if I bought him the burgers he was on his way to get. His grin was comedy gold. Ended up buying the burgers for the whole department. That was expensive. Yeah, I was really lucky. This happened when I was 18 and I'm 21 now. If it helps, white as can be. For a broke college student, over $250 for burgers was a bit steep. I'm just happy it all ended on a positive note. My parents don't know and probably never will. Thank God or whatever other deity. Let's go with Odin. Praise be to Odin. When I was 19, I worked at a summer camp as a sort of supervisor for a group of counselors. There was an event coming up and I'd wanted to take the day off in order to attend. My boss insisted that it wasn't possible for me to take the day off, so I decided to call in sick because it teed me off. Now, knowing that I'd need a note from my physician, I actually went to the doctor the following day. My normal doctor wasn't in, and a nurse practitioner was filling in. She did a pretty thorough exam, poking and prodding my stomach and asking me if it hurt. I probably reacted in a couple of areas, trying to really sell my illness. At this point, she recommends that I visit the ER because she believes I might have appendicitis. This means a better doctor's note, right? So, I'm in the ER, my entire family is there at this point, and they're having me drink the barium milkshakes to prepare for imaging to see if I need to have an appendectomy. I have to drink 4 of these things over an hour, and I'm on my last one, and the ER doc comes in and tells me he's going to have the surgeon come in to chat. Knowing that they're going to take these pictures and that everything will be fine, I'm not concerned. Well, the surgeon comes in after I've finished that last drink, and he says that he can see I'm in some pain. I guess I'm still selling it. To which I explain that we're going to take the pictures to see if it's legit. I know these will turn up negative. He then answers that he doesn't need the pictures and we should just go to surgery now. 10 years on, I'm appendix-free, and to this day I still haven't told my family. In short, I faked being sick to get back at my boss, and now I don't have an appendix. Well, here's hoping that they don't work out that the appendix really is used for space travel or to harness midichlorians or something really important in the near future. Otherwise, you blew your chance to live in the Star Wars to get your boss off your back for one day. Got into a drunken fight with my wife, drove off angrily, crashed into a tree, spent a long time in intensive care, almost died, face permanently disfigured. My older sister was teasing me mercilessly when I was about 8 years old. I was stewing over it for about an hour and decided that the best revenge would be to destroy her favorite blanket that our mother had made by hand. One for her, one for me, cut from the same cloth. I grabbed her blanket and a pair of scissors and proceeded to cut the blankie to ribbons in front of her. She started laughing hysterically, which was not the reaction I'd expected. I looked at what was left of the blanket, saw my initials on it, and realized that I'd mistakenly destroyed my favorite blankie. In a heated argument with my mum, I shouted, "Suck my eggplant." I instantly regretted that. Not about myself, but my dad. He used to have a serious drinking problem, and one night when I was in high school, I was driving home from work and the town I lived in was very small. I ended up driving behind a truck that I was pretty certain was my dad's. Now, I should add that I was driving with my brights on because one of my headlights was messed up and it wouldn't turn on without having the brights on. Well, I'm driving home thinking how funny it is that I ended up behind my dad when he slows down and comes to a complete stop at a curve where I couldn't get around him. I was very confused. He gets out of his car and starts screaming at me from his car. He's calling me all sorts of names and grabs a Frosty from Wendy's and throws it at my car. He ended up throwing it so hard that it dented the middle of my hood. I was absolutely terrified. He had gotten mad like this before, but I seriously had no idea what I'd done to tee him off so bad. He starts walking towards my car, and even though he was a good distance away, I could see the look of rage in his eyes. I was physically shaken. So much so that I couldn't even manage to cry because I was so terrified. Turns out my dad had gotten into an argument with a guy in the Wendy's parking lot who had a similar car to me, and since I had my brights on, he couldn't tell it was me. Not to mention, he was probably driving drunk. When he got to my door, I assume he was planning on grabbing the guy out, my dad just stopped frozen. He got back in his truck and drove away. When I got home, he walked into his room, grabbed a bag, and left to stay in a hotel and start getting help. He couldn't look me or my mother in the eye. I was playing chess with my mum. I was in my elementary school's chess club at the time, so I thought I was pretty hot stuff. I was 10, however, and she was an adult, so she was beating me without effort. I was a little jerk, so it didn't take long for me to reach my 10-year-old boiling point. In a fit of misplaced child rage, I picked up one of her knights and I bit it. It was a cheap plastic set, so I managed to take a chip out of it. The knight remains chipped, and to this day, whenever I get upset about something, my mum just says, "Don't bite the pony." When I was around 9 years old, my sister was always a bit of a bully to me. At the time, she had a broken leg and was using crutches to get around. While walking down the stairs, she hit me with one of her crutches. Apparently at the time I'd had enough of her crap, so I turned and kicked both of her crutches out. Halfway down the stairs, she fell about 9 stairs down and probably had to keep the cast on her leg for another few months because of that. For clarification, my sister was and still is a bit of a jerk. I was probably around 12, my older sister had a friend over and was being really mean to me. She was in her room with the door shut, so I took some string and tied her doorknob to mine across the hall so she couldn't open hers. Of course, right after I did that, she knocked a bottle of nail polish remover onto a candle and lit her carpet on fire. And that is how I lost my… I'm joking. Yes, I cut the string and no, they weren't hurt. Her friend actually told her to stop being so mean to me. But the next time I'm 12 and upset, I'll remember that teenagers aren't very responsible with fire. I really thought that was going in a different direction. Wow. Not me, but my brother. I hope the entertaining story makes that okay as a submission. So my brother is a rageaholic, especially when playing Xbox first-person shooters. He has thrown and destroyed about 5 or 6 Xbox 360 controllers. These things range from $50 to $60 each. He doesn't buy knockoff brands either. One night, during a peak of extreme intensity, he was moments away from smashing yet another controller. Hand raised in the air, ready to be smashed to the ground as hard as possible. Suddenly, a brief lucid moment crossed his mind. Perhaps I shouldn't do this. It's going to cost me another $60 if I break this controller. But rage overflowing and hand already in the air, all he could alter about the decision in that split second was to smash the controller down onto the couch instead of the floor. Well, it just so happened that he had placed his brand new iPhone on the couch earlier before starting his gaming session and completely forgotten it was there until the moment the remote made a shattering contact with it. This, of course, triggered some sort of super rage. I tried not to break my controller. How could fate do this to me? I believe is a semi-accurate paraphrasing of his thought train. With Super Rage mode activated, the obvious logical course of action was to kick the 50-inch projection television as hard as he could. He put his foot right through the screen, decided to get blackout drunk, and woke up to a destroyed living room with a shattered iPhone and destroyed TV filled with vomit. He vaguely remembers laughing as he threw up into the hole in the TV. The Xbox remote was fine though, since you're asking. I should add, he was around 30 years old when this happened. We're roommates. That man has problems and should probably be in an anger management class of some sort. Although just for this one story, I'm somewhat glad he isn't because that's funny as all heck. Throwing my phone because I was arguing with the Lenovo customer support about the warranty on my broken laptop. The phone hit the TV, which cracked the screen on both the phone and TV. Now I'm using Internet Explorer on a library computer and I regret everything. I can totally see that happening because phones are just so perfect for throwing in anger. I can't even remember all the times I got upset after a conversation and then just threw the phone on the table, until one day it bounced back and cracked the mirror. I was eating some tuna after having a bad day. My younger brother kept teasing me for something I don't remember now and wouldn't shut up after I told him to several times. All of a sudden, I grabbed my fork and launched it at him. The fork hits him in the head, and 5 seconds later, blood starts coming out of his head with increasing intensity. The consequences? A lesson. If you're having a really bad day, don't take it out on others. Especially your family, which is the only group of guys that really give a crap about you. Also, there was a life scar on his forehead. My first boyfriend threw a bean at his cousin at his 8th birthday party. She retaliated by throwing a fork into his eye. He had to have his lens removed, and his pupil expanded to fill his entire iris. Despite being partially blind in that eye, he had a great sense of humor about it. He was able to finally get surgery to fix it when he was 18. Eye surgery seemed even more traumatic than the original injury. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Punching a huge dent in the side of the refrigerator. I am not a smart man. My younger brother was troubled in his teens, to say the least. He had a lot of anger issues. I've never been a fighter, however he and my older brother were totally different. They saw violence as the only answer to disagreements. Anyway, one night I'm in my house with my friends and I get a call from my mum. My younger brother and his friend were at her house tormenting her. They were both completely drunk. I made my way there. She only stays a couple of streets away. In the time it took me to get there, she had called the police after my brother had hit her and thrown her down the stairs. She had managed to get him out of the house, but he and his friends were trying to break the door down to get back in. My brother had quite the reputation with the local police, and so they sent as many resources as they could. 5 police cars and a police dog unit. My mum's street was lit up in blue and red flashing lights by the time I got there. My brother and his friend had run into the large car park behind my mum's house when they heard the sirens of the police. so the dog unit was out trying to find them while I comforted my mother. They eventually were found hiding in a bush and were dragged back to a police car in cuffs. This was a Friday night. My brother was supposed to be working all weekend, but I knew if they took him away, he'd be locked up until Monday at the earliest. I spoke to the policeman in charge and convinced him that I could control my brother when he was drunk. That was a lie. I pleaded with them to let him come stay at my house rather than lock him up. My mum tearfully agreed and they let me walk away with him. The policeman, however, gave me his mobile number and told me to phone him directly if there was any more trouble with my brother, as he'd be patrolling the area most of the night anyway. My brother and I walked away, and to begin with, there were no problems. Then, as we get closer to mine, the drunken slurs start and he tells me he hates me, this is all my fault, he's ashamed to be my brother because I'm gay, yada yada yada. So I decide I don't want him to come to mine, and I reach into my pocket to get my phone so that I could phone that policeman and just have him taken away. At that precise moment, I look up and my brother has swung a punch in my direction. I dodged it and clocked him in the side of the head with the phone, smashing it. He almost lost balance and then definitely did when I punched him again. I completely lost it. All the rage at what he'd done to my mum, for what he'd said to me, for the way he acted, it all came out. I was kicking him repeatedly. I was wearing Timberland boots, and I was punching him over and over. It wasn't until I'd sat on him, pinning him to the ground and punched him one final time that I realized what I'd done. I watched as his head flopped back, his eyes rolled back, and a pool of blood appeared under his head. I was certain that I'd killed him. I couldn't phone for help because I'd smashed my phone. I couldn't shout for help as it's 2 a.m. and there's nobody around. Right then, I make the single scariest decision I've ever made. I put my coat under his head and I leave him there in the pouring rain. I run back to my house faster than any human has probably ever moved. I get to mine, burst in the door and shout at my friend to call an ambulance and tell them where my brother is then take off running back to him. Luckily, he's still laying there, out cold but breathing, thank God. One of my friends arrives a minute or so later. We keep him warm until the ambulance arrives. The policeman also arrived at the same time. He said it was likely my brother wouldn't remember what was happened, he was that drunk, and that he wouldn't put this in the final report. I get in the ambulance with him to the hospital and then sat there for the next 8 hours waiting for him to regain consciousness. When he was able to have a visitor in the room, I walked through ready to apologize. And what happened next blew me away. He broke down in tears immediately, apologizing for always being such an insufferable butthole, begging me to forgive him. And that was the end of my brother's troubled teen years. He ended up with a broken nose, half an ear missing from scraping against the ground as I kicked him, a fractured cheekbone and a hairline fracture in his skull. He couldn't go to work for a month, which was made even more torturous for him because my mum, understandably, refused to talk to him or do anything for him. They didn't speak for about 18 months until he gave her her first grandchild. That brought the whole family together and completely changed him. Now our family are stronger than ever. We might have come out the other side stronger, but that feeling where I thought I'd killed my younger brother, that feeling will always make that angry decision the worst decision I've ever made. In short, my brother beat up my mum, so I beat him within an inch of his life. Yep, well, there's some understandably complex feelings going on here. We don't know for sure if your brother's turnaround would have come anytime soon. It's possible, but I think we should just leave this as a just be thankful it turned out the way it did and not with him dead moment. This could have very easily been terrible. When I was 14, my dad forgot to pick me up after school, and he told me to find my own way home. I walked approximately 8.5 miles to get to my house. Then he wouldn't let me in. I was so angry I went to my neighbor's house. It was a kid in the same grade as me who lived there, Mike, and when I told him what had happened, he said I could come in. He had an older brother who smoked cigarettes and green herb. I had never smoked or drunk before, but I was mad, really mad. We stole all of his stuff, got high, and smoked all night in Mike's bedroom. The consequences? 11 years later, still smoke cigarettes and dealing with cancer. Worst decision ever. All because I was angry with my crappy dad. I was a little kid, around 8 years old, and I'd gotten in a fight with my sister. I got really mad and threw one of those mini CDs at her in rage. It was a GameCube game, I think. It curved perfectly through the air and hit her right between the eyes. I'm laughing about it now, but she had a scar for a while. When my sister and I were much younger, we fell out and argued for probably the first time. She was just old enough to be trusted to walk around the house on her own and stuff, and I'm about 5 years older than her. We fell out, I can't remember what over, but shortly after she came back into the room we'd been in. She was in tears and holding a piece of paper. It was a picture of me and her holding hands and the words, "I'm sorry." I ripped it up in front of her eyes, threw it to the ground, and left the room. I'm sure she doesn't remember this, but it still gets to me to this day. We get on as well as two siblings possibly could nowadays. I reckon if I asked her, she wouldn't have a clue, but I'll never forget looking at her as she welled up right in front of me. Okay, update. I've just been to my sister's room and asked if she remembered. She didn't. I told her how it plagues me every day, and she laughed it off. She's cool like that. It's made me feel a lot better by getting the closure, and by the sounds of things, many of you guys also seek this kind of closure. I've been reading down here, and there's a lot of you with much worse things plaguing your minds. Seriously, you should talk to the people you've wronged if you can. Get the closure. It's comforting. After a series of frustrating events, screw it. Today is a good day to try a cigarette. I'm still trying to quit 9 years later. I got angry at someone who was born and proceeded to treat them like crap for almost 8 years. I was 8 or something when my cousin was brought into the world. When he got older, he was always over here. I don't know why I hated my little cousin so much. He was a great kid. I just had this rage. It would manifest in doing tiny little things to hurt him. Maybe trip him, or just destroying him repeatedly in video games or things like that. I used to glare at him a lot when he wasn't looking. When he was about 8 and I was about 16, I had to watch him for a little bit, and he wanted to go outside and play with this stupid little golf set. But all I wanted to do was stay in the house and play video games. He dragged me out and gave me a turn, and I accidentally hit him on the head when I went to swing. And by accidentally, I mean completely on purpose, but looked like it was an accident. So I hit him. He broke down crying and had a small gash on his head. I took him into the house and cleaned his cut and was indifferent to his crying, just coldly saying it was an accident. Then he replies through the tears, "It's okay, I know you wouldn't hurt me on purpose." That's when it hit me. Almost like I hit him. That's when I realized what a freaking crappy human being I'd been. I treated him like he was freaking trash. What the hell was I doing? Why the F was I so angry? After that, all of my meanness towards him just kind of went away. I'd say that we're pretty much best friends since then. I didn't say goodbye to my mum the last time I ever saw her. I wished in my head that she'd die. Only because I was angry, she and my brother were going to Fiji without me, and I was stuck with having to go to work. But I didn't realize it was because her radiation therapy hadn't worked, and she was pretty much going home to die. I had no idea it had progressed to that stage, so when she came to hug me, I turned away, so she gave me a side hug. Well, that was the best she could do, and she was pretty weak at that stage. I still feel like the worst person alive thinking about her face that morning and her tiny little bony frame pressed up against mine. I guess my mum didn't tell me herself, probably because she was a super positive kind of person. In the last couple of months before she passed, she was still telling me her plans about what she was going to be doing. In her words, when I get better. She had plans for where she was going to go forward with her career. She had a psychology degree, but worked with disabled people in a respite center. It didn't seem like she could die to me, really. That added to my shock, I guess. Years ago, I was really angry at my roommate because she couldn't keep a secret, so I punched a framed picture of her that was on the wall. The glass cut into every one of my knuckles. The worst was my thumb. The blood took forever to stop, and I just bandaged it really tight. After about 3 days, I started to notice red streaks running up my arm. I showed my dad, and he took me to the hospital. Turns out I cut my tendon, and the joint had gotten severely infected. The doctor said I was hours away from losing my thumb. After surgery, I had to stay in the hospital for 5 days with an IV hooked up. The morphine was nice, though. When I was a kid, my little sister did something to enrage me. She's standing in front of one of the walls, and I decided to wind up and launch the biggest haymaker a 6-year-old can muster. It was a glorious swing that ended up impacting the wall as she matrixed out of the way. I ended up running to my mum, screaming and bawling that my sister was mean, so I tried to punch her, but she moved, causing me to injure myself. My mum laughed at me and walked away. What immediately sets off alarms to a couples therapist? When one person is entirely dependent on the other, especially at a relatively young age, I mean financially and emotionally. These are typically young women, sometimes young men as well, who don't work, don't have children, stay at home all day and have no friends or hobbies outside of hanging out with their spouse. It's very unhealthy and a huge red flag. It always ends in a painful and messy breakup. Generally, we try to get them to find a friend, join a community, get a job, or volunteer, something to provide them with self-worth and personal fulfillment outside of their spouse. One partner says they're seeking your services to help them determine if they want to stay together, and the other partner says they're seeking your services to make it so they stay together. Then it's about highlighting the points and allowing the person who's on the fence to decide what they want. since the other person already knows. I'm sorry to be reading about how many people experienced being the person who wanted to stay together when their partner was unsure. I hope that whatever happened, you found or are finding happiness again. I saw a couple that was doing retaliatory cheating and telling each other about it. When they got through their anger, they decided to call a truce and make peace. With their level of emotional maturity, I doubt it lasted. I don't know if I helped them or prolonged their suffering. It was a decision to come to counseling, so I think it was the help they wanted. Other clients realize what they really want is divorce counseling. What's the best way to behave civilly and minimize damage to the kids while we go our separate ways? People who approach therapy with the idea that they must convince the therapist that they're right and their partner is wrong. Almost like they're complaining to a parent or boss to have them sort out their problems. Yes, my patient wanted me to pick a side and complained about the partner every single time. When I pointed that out, the person just said, "Oh, you don't understand." Yes, this was a majority of the therapy sessions I had with my ex, trying to point out all the things I did wrong so the therapist could tell us how to fix it. My therapist, straight face, told me that there are worse options than divorce. I got divorced and it was the best thing that happened to me. That's what my therapist said to me shortly after we got kicked out of couples counseling because my partner was so unmanageable. It genuinely was the best decision for me. My partner is still angry that I left, but I've never felt better about myself. I guess this is about as close as a therapist can come to recommending you divorce your partner without actually saying you should divorce your partner. It's a bit of a minefield, I suppose, and that you're being paid to help them, but if one partner won't listen to that help or be constructive, I guess your options are limited. Child and family therapist here. Not exactly couples therapy, but there are key family dynamics that set off red flags for interpersonal relationships within a family, whether it's between parents, parents and kids, or simply kids. The most important piece comes from invalidation. This comes in many forms, from gaslighting to just simple denial of another's opinion. Most of the time, one or both parties are simply trying to be heard on an emotional level with an event or topic that was brought up, but the other party takes this as a personal attack on their ideals. We've all heard of or know of people who'll literally disagree with anything you say simply because you said it. That's the sort of invalidation I'm referring to. The cliché moral of the story? Attack the problem, not each other. People rarely have the exact same stance in a conflict, but usually, in a healthy relationship, they have very similar core values. While two parents might disagree on how to parent a child, like authoritarian versus authoritative, for example, the core value of caring about their children and wanting them to succeed is often the same. By determining they're within the same realm of issue, two parents with different ideals can see themselves as allies in a conflict rather than enemies. Two things that people believe are red flags of poor relationships are the amount of conflicts the couple has and yelling. Neither of these things is inherently a characteristic of a good or bad relationship, but may be perceived as more common in bad relationships. The reality of the situation is that healthy relationships actually have a comparable amount of conflicts, but more intensely focus on addressing the core issue rather than the beliefs and self-worth of the other. As for yelling, in this case it's an emotional response to not feeling heard, generally. While not the best response to distress, it also isn't an indicator of poor communication skills. What is an indicator of poor communication is yelling over the other person in an attempt to invalidate their point. As a semi-related example, I had two people who were seemingly incredibly upset at each other. Parent A felt that Parent B was out of the house too frequently and didn't want to be a part of their children's life. Parent B felt that Parent A didn't understand how busy their work schedule was. The fight revolved around Parent B seemingly not caring about the kids, until Parent B finally explained they felt Parent A was better at parenting and felt like they were only escalating the children when they started to parent. Parent A's understanding of the argument quickly changed from "you don't love our children" to "you're scared to let our children down." As you can guess, the tone of the conversation changed dramatically, and there was no longer a sense that parents A and B were on opposing sides. The issue instead became helping build confidence in Parent B's parenting abilities, which Parent A was much more validating and supportive of. Not all cases are this clean-cut in their solutions by any means, but I figured I'd demonstrate the basic idea of finding core values and attacking an issue together. Contempt. When I experience true contempt from one of the parties in the relationship, I know it's usually over. Look towards a peaceful ending at that point if it's possible. Contempt, one of Dr. John Gottman's 4 horsemen predictors of divorce, along with criticism, stonewalling, and defensiveness. Yes, yet I place contempt above them all. One can usually work through the others just by reflecting the behaviors and patterns, yet contempt borders on hatred, dug-in hatred. Relationship therapist here. One of the biggest red flags I see when working with new couples is when they've totally forgotten the good. Part of relationship therapy is reconnecting a couple with what they like about each other, what initially attracted them to each other, and what the positives are between them. When people come in and they've been so unhappy for so long, they usually can't remember what it was like to be in love, or even to like each other. They're just about hopeless. You don't have to be happy for therapy to work, but if you can't even reminisce about the good times, then the good times are probably over. I'm getting replies from some people this is clearly resonating with, so I'd like to recommend a book. If you find yourself in this situation, check out Hold Me Tight by Dr. Sue Johnson. She gives some explanations of how people get into this cycle, as well as some suggestions on how to try and navigate it. Couples in a tit-for-tat arrangement. For example, I cheated on you so you can have one night to cheat with whomever. Or I violated your trust and did substances so you can go out and do whatever for one night. This just erodes trust and compounds the hurt. An affair that won't end. I've never seen a relationship bounce back when a partner is still in contact with their girlfriend and boyfriend, and I don't mean their exes, I mean the person X is having the affair with, or where they've been lying about it. Control to an excessive amount. I most commonly see partners having to send pictures holding up a certain number of fingers or proving that it's a live picture. This is abuse. Overbearing parents and in-laws. I understand there's a ton of cultural nuance here, and I work with couples who've arranged marriages, as well as the South Asian community. However, when a spouse is more allied with their parents and calls them on speakerphones for fights, or often speaks ill of their partner to their parents, I usually see these couples stay very unhappily married for years. It's sad. If it's not this bad and a partner is willing to end an affair and genuinely work on it, I'll help support. I think couples therapy is sometimes helping couples have the courage to voice what they really want, and that might just be separation. I was in couples therapy. At the end of the first session, the therapist asked us to say one nice thing about each other. I went first and said something about him. The therapist asked him to say something, and he replied with, "My mother always told me that if you can't say something nice, say nothing. So I'll say nothing." I felt so sorry for the therapist. And yes, that's when I started planning my exit. I'm now in a very happy new relationship, and my revenge is to be living my best life. Very happy now. It's very easy to work out when one person knowingly prioritizes their own wants and needs over their partner's. Relationships like this are often doomed because the person simply doesn't care enough to make any meaningful change. This bit hits hard. I've been trying with my wife, but she is not interested. She asked to separate just before Christmas. I asked her to move out on my birthday earlier this week. It hurts to be in the same house with someone you love but who isn't able to feel the same. But it also hurts to be apart from them. Isn't that the truth? Long, drawn-out breakups, punctuated by those brief moments of hope where you have a good day and you think maybe it'll work out, really are just painful and can hurt for so long afterwards. I'll take them giving me a brief sucker punch to the gonads and sprinting for the exits with all of my expensive stuff any day. Well, someone else's response made me think of this one. When a partner raises an objection to meeting with me individually. During the first session, I shared that during assessment, I like to meet with them both together and once each individually. Occasionally, I'll have partners who suddenly become very critical or suspicious about this, asking why I do that. Is it ethical? And the classic, "I've never heard of a marriage counselor doing that before." It goes beyond curiosity or simply inquiring about a practice. There's an incredulous and almost panicked tone to it. And sure enough, every single time they turn out to be some variation of controlling, manipulative, and without any of your best interests at heart. Just to clarify for a few of the comments, I'm not talking about doing concurrent, ongoing individual and couple sessions. This is just a one-off individual assessment session. My first 3 sessions are usually 1. Couple sessions, 2. Partner A individual, and 3. Partner B individual. After that, we're typically only as a couple unless another one-off is needed for further assessment down the road. If needed, I refer out for ongoing concurrent individual, or I pause for more intensive individual. My mum is a therapist, and she sometimes tells me a little bit about her cases, nothing specific or identifying, of course. She once came home really upset about a case and told me a little bit. Basically, this guy sent his wife in because she was having trouble with the baby. He came with her and interrupted her at basically every turn, and basically told my mum his wife was bipolar. In another session, the patient admitted she almost felt angry with the baby and herself because she knew she'd be a terrible mother. Her husband had been saying it since she got pregnant. My mum told me it became almost instantly clear that the husband was manipulative and censorious, and probably trying to stop her from connecting with the child. As soon as my mum suggested she was angry with her husband and not her baby, all of their future sessions were cancelled. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This wasn't my client, but I had to watch as my own roommate dealt with her fiancé. He was A. controlling her, physically, her activities and her financials, B. continuously dismissing her feelings and assessments and opinions. The fiancé would revert to baby talk, speaking to roommate like she was an uneducated child, in a daddy knows best kind of gaslighting garbage way. And C. trying to hide his narcissistic tendencies behind his good church boy exterior. This was all happening in my condo while she was waiting to move out and marry him. I usually tried to stay out of their issues, but one afternoon I softly encouraged her, saying I agreed with her about an argument I'd witnessed earlier in the day. She came back that night after the fiancé convinced her that I was jealous and trying to break them up so I could have him. She barely talked to me again until she moved out. Sadly, they did get married, have 2 kids, and she's completely isolated as a stay-at-home mum. I don't even want to imagine what it's like for her at home. High conflict relationships. If frequent and bitter conflict began a few months or less after the relationship began and continued, relation therapy is going to be a crap show. It won't be helpful. Either the conflict will continue indefinitely or it'll just come to an end. Not just my opinion, the research supports this. All of these responses have made me so much more grateful for my younger sister, who pestered me until I was in tears of anger to leave my ex. Within a week, I could see how much better my life was without him already. I'll never be able to tell her how much it means to me that she was ready for me to hate her as long as it meant I was away from him. I'll just say that if you find yourself screaming, "I'm not effing yelling at you," you might have a communication problem. I want to add a more thoughtful note, but I should also mention that I mainly work with individuals. Similar to what people have already said, the reddest of flags for me is when clients try to take sides. I can understand why people may do that every now and then during more difficult discussions, but if it happens consistently, it's a huge problem. There are plenty of reasons why people may do this, but the reality is that therapy is meant to foster cooperation between partners. Feeling like you need the therapist on your side indicates you're approaching the relationship as a competition, not a cooperative interaction, and nothing good comes from that. Also, I once had a supervisor who did a great deal of couples work tell me that it has such a bad success rate because people rarely come before the relationship has crossed the point of no return. Unfortunately, that seems to be a very accurate description. Whataboutism. Instead of taking ownership and responsibility for their contribution to the degradation of the relationship, one or both parties simply point out an example of the other exhibiting a similar behavior. It's a red flag because it illustrates their lack of self-awareness and poor communication skills. Communication is key when trying to mend a tattered relationship because without respectful communication, the conflict recovery process can never begin. In the conflict recovery model, both parties agree to the terms under which they'll communicate, like no yelling, no interrupting, and no "I told you so's." Each party gets a chance to share how the other's actions make them feel. Then they each propose their solutions and identify why they made assumptions or where they got triggered and why. Then they identify where they're willing to compromise. Next, we create an actionable plan with deadlines and we monitor the progress to see if the proposed solutions were effective. In my opinion, everything can go to crap, but once communication stagnates, you're in real trouble. So even if you're arguing that you're still doing okay, you just need to work on how you're communicating. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and for me, an unofficial litmus test is when I ask at some point in the first few sessions how the couple met. If there is absolutely no positive affect from either person, and no one even cracks a smile, or if they just give me a single-sentence answer, "We met at a party," that's usually a signal they've been unhappy for so long or the conflict is so overwhelming that they just can't access those good, warm, fuzzy feelings from the beginning. I partly wanted to do this job because I'm a romantic at heart and I love hearing real love stories. And for the most part, hearing about their first few months together is an actually fun and illuminating part of therapy. Only a few times have I seen the flat or no affect couples, and it breaks my heart every time. I remember learning in grad school that most couples who come into therapy have lived unhappily for an average of 7 years before trying to get help. They come for that first session, and if they aren't cured after that, most think that therapy doesn't work and they just don't come back. To anyone who may be considering individual or couples therapy as a result of this thread, go for it, and be prepared for it to take some time and energy for you and your therapist. I think this is an important point to make. I remember the therapist on Cinema Therapy saying that his favorite sort of clients are the ones who come in when the relationship is actually going great, and they want to make sure it stays that way, which seems like an easy paycheck to some, but it is a great way to identify any small upcoming speed bumps and to reaffirm what you love best about each other. Definitely something to think about. I'm not a couples therapist, but I recommended a couples therapist to a coworker for some premarital counseling. My partner and I had really enjoyed our premarital sessions from this super nice therapist, and when a girl from my work got engaged, she asked for his number. The day after their first session, I got a call from the girl saying, "I can't believe you sent me to this horrible, invasive, rude counselor." I was in a panic. Oh no, what happened? She explained, "We went in there and sat down, and the first thing he asked was, 'So, why do you want to get married?'" How rude is that? How dare he? And that's when I realized that maybe their relationship wasn't going to pan out. They called off the wedding a few months later. As a clinical psychologist, I focused mainly on behavioral medicine and cognitive assessment, but I did my fair share of marriage and couples work. Refusal or inability to compromise is a ginormous red flag, one that I believe is empirically validated. Compromise is a significant predictor of satisfaction in relationships, and it plays an important role in the long-term success of marriages and relationships in general. I'm reading through these as a mental checklist to keep in check my own actions, not just my partner's. Thank you to everybody for sharing. My mum is a couples therapist, and she says that there are some people that she's told, "You're not going to work out" on the first couple of sessions. I was just talking about this case today. Years ago, when I was starting out, I had a female client come in and she reported anxiety, depression, and a few other things because her ex-husband was bothering her. I thought that was completely average and normal, so I asked about it. She recounted many times that her and her ex had clashed. I said, "You know, you don't have to interact with him, and maybe just distancing yourself is the way to go." She told me they still lived together and she had no plans on moving. That red flag indicated I was dealing with two crazy people. My parents are this, legally separated but they live together. I'm the poster child for don't stay together for the kids. We're all adults now, but they still live together because separating assets is hard, and they're both so crazy that nobody else will keep them company. My grand aunt was a couples therapist for many, many years. Now she volunteers at her church counseling couples. She's my relationship sage. Number of red flags she's told me about. The first is spouses who don't sleep together without a justifiable reason. As in, not due to work conflicts or medical reasons, but because one spouse just doesn't feel like going to bed alongside the other. A lack of intimacy, both for bedroom stuff or just for the sake of nearness, will lead to the two drifting apart. Then there's when one spouse has a close relationship with a member of the opposite gender who doesn't like the other spouse. The old, he or she's just a friend. If it doesn't lead to cheating, it will still usually cause unneeded strain that will break apart the relationship. The third one, which initially surprised me, was, we're staying together for the kids. It leads to an unhealthy mindset where the couple sees the children as a burden and believe that by remaining in an unhealthy relationship, it will somehow make the kid turn out alright. Kids are smarter than you think, and if mum and dad don't love each other, they will pick up on it. If the kids are really the priority, either learn to fix the relationship or end it. And fourth, in premarital counseling, when the couple states that they're saving themselves for their wedding night, and then one or both confide privately that they're not a virgin and the other has no idea. In broader terms, when a couple isn't honest with each other about their relationship history. So many reasons why that's unhealthy. I can't even begin to list them all, but the biggest is that honesty is the most solid foundation on which to build a relationship. If you're afraid of what your partner will think, ask yourself if you want to deal with it now or later. Deal with it now. The biggest problems she's dealt with are when it's clearly the fault of one member of the relationship and the other desperately wants to fix the issue. Like in the first instance, she told me of a couple where she understood that the wife wanted out of the relationship but didn't want to directly confront her husband about it, while the husband thought the issue was just a minor problem. Turns out the wife had to actually cheat in order for the husband to realize how serious things were, which led to him ending up on antidepressants and contemplating just not being alive anymore. From what she told me, that one ended in acrimonious divorce, but she never told me what became of either party. Something she emphasizes is that people are often blind to the red flags that a therapist can spot right away. Such is the nature of being a trained professional. It's why she recommends people see a counselor even if they don't think their issues are that deep. It's not shameful to ask for help, she always says. Reading all of this just makes me realize how lucky I was to muster up the power to break up with my ex. I knew she was horrible and toxic towards the end of things, but holy crap, it's worse than I thought. Once worked with a woman whose boyfriend had aggressively tried to pick up a coworker while he was at work, but she was convinced it was just a misunderstanding. So I knew that was a relationship that wouldn't last and that she struggled to pick up stable partners. I was right. IT people are the worst at couples counseling. They keep asking, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" I've seen individuals, but did coursework in couples therapy. It's always a dooming sign when one of the patients doesn't want to be there and is unwilling to try. Those never end well. When did a cop catch someone doing something really suspicious, but for a totally legitimate reason? At around 2 a.m. on a weeknight, I saw a guy bolt from a house in a quiet residential burglary hotspot. His face is covered, he's wearing sunglasses or something similar, and the kind of dark clothing you catch burglars in. As I follow him and start to shout up on the radio, the cars parked between us clear to reveal he's running behind the tiniest dog I've ever seen. A clearly uncontrollable pooch that's having the time of its life. So I just keep going. And to clarify, the dog was on a lead. He was stopping to sniff at lampposts. It wasn't a dog napping. The man was running as he was trying to keep up with the dog while letting it go at the pace it wanted to go. He ran from the house, but the front door was closed. Doglet took off when they hit the pavement. When I got closer, those sunglasses he was wearing weren't sunglasses after all, just tinted glasses. I don't know why he had his face covered. It was a scarf and it was autumn, but we don't have sumptuary laws in our country and you can wear what you like. I'm not the fashion police. I spoke to him when I saw him later on, but I don't remember the dog's name. Sorry. And for those of you asking, it wasn't even an expensive dog. It was a cheap dog. Cheap dogs have more fun, I reckon. Prior US Coast Guard. We were doing a security boarding on a vessel planning on entering port with some hazardous cargo. Me and one other guy were in the engine room, making sure everything was kosher, when we catch a glimpse of some boots barely sticking out from under a piece of machinery. Since, as far as we knew, all crew were present and accounted for above deck, we were understandably concerned. We radio up asking about it and get told all present and accounted for up above. So we're thinking a stowaway or someone being smuggled. Luckily, it was neither, just a guy who legitimately fell asleep while doing some maintenance. He shared a name with one of the other crew, so that's how he missed his absence. Apparently our guy up above checked the same guy twice. Go figure. My cousin is a cop and told us the story of seeing a car driving slowly at about 3 a.m. through a neighborhood that had had several break-ins. He thinks to himself that they're looking for a target, so he puts on his lights and pulls them over. He walks up and the driver puts the window down and she turns to look at him with fire in her eyes and says in a harsh whisper, "This had better be important because I just got the baby to sleep." He looks in the back and there's a baby in the car seat, sound asleep. The memory of what it was like when his babies wouldn't sleep rushes back, so he says, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, never mind." And he goes back to his car. She drives away slowly. He's just glad he didn't wake the baby. Well, it looks like that woman found the perfect cover. Start the kid off young doing that job and he'll be a legendary master burglar by the time he's 10. I love it when hardened enforcers go soft when it becomes clear there are kids on the scene. Actual cop here. I work midnights, and one night I'm sitting in my cruiser at like 2 a.m. doing paperwork. I see an older model car driving slowly around the area and then pull into an abandoned parking lot and black out in the corner by the woods. No lighting. This is for a building that's being torn down. This is not normal, so I'll look into it. I pull up to him and get out. "How are you doing?" I asked. "What's going on in this parking lot tonight?" The guy's got bags of something in his back seat and he's alone. He's an older guy and seems a little off. He tells me, "I'm here to feed the cats." And I think to myself, this is a bullcrap answer, and I attempt to call his bluff. "Okay, where are the—" And then like 40 cats come running out of the woods. The guy asks me, "May I?" And I say, sure." He gets out of the car and starts feeding the cats from the dry food in his bags. The closest thing I can describe it as was the scene in Ace Ventura where his pets all come out of hiding. Okay, go on about your business, I guess, and then I left. My husband told me a story of one time when he was patrolling around and spotted a guy who was in a straitjacket come around the corner of the town that he was patrolling in, and he was instantly suspicious. He ran over and grabbed him and asked what he was doing. He said he was just messing around with a friend, but he lost his friend and couldn't get out of the jacket. So my husband asked to call his friend just in case, and lo and behold, he wasn't even lying. Cop here, well, technically military really. I'm an officer with the Portuguese National Republican Guard, similar to the French gendarmes. We're generally responsible for policing rural, low-population areas, though we do also take on some military expeditionary roles, like peacekeeping presence in Timor. The point is, if you live in rural Portugal, we're the ones who are going to come out when you need help or have trouble. About 2 years ago, there was a murder. An old man was stabbed and bled out in his kitchen, and the wife came home to find him dead lying on the counter. She called 112, that's the 911 equivalent here, and I was dispatched along with some colleagues. The paramedics confirmed the death on site, but we didn't want to move the body before the judiciary police came to have a look and do forensics. Not only that, but the old lady wasn't doing so good with the shock, so after about 20 minutes of her hyperventilating, we got her in the ambulance and the paramedics took her to the hospital. That means me and my colleague were left guarding the body and trying to keep things as we found them, while still looking around for evidence. About an hour later, we hear a truck arrive. My colleague goes up from the basement where we were, but I stay longer to have a better look around. Came back up 10 minutes later to find the body gone. I look outside and see two guys shoving it into the back of a nondescriptive refrigerated truck. I came out running and yelling with my weapon out, thinking the murderer was back and trying to cover their tracks. My colleague steps out from behind the truck. Turns out the morgue vehicle was broken and they were using a rental to transport the bodies. The two guys I saw were morgue workers and were just putting the body in the truck to carry it to the morgue, while my colleague was talking with a third. The judiciary police only came about 2 hours later. This is a hearsay story from a family friend who was a sergeant in a major West Coast city. One of his new officers was late for roll call one night. After about 45 minutes, the sergeant gets a call from another station asking if he was the sergeant for the missing officer, and hilarity ensues. Apparently, the missing officer was getting ready to leave his apartment for roll call for the night shift. As he walked out the stairs, he sees a guy in a ski mask hop through his neighbor's window. The cop radios the burglary in progress and runs back to his apartment to get his shotty. When he gets back to the neighbor's house, he heard a female screaming and the sounds of a struggle. The cop announces himself, kicks open the front door, runs to the kitchen, and sees what he thinks is ski mask guy committing the unspeakable act on the neighbor. The neighbor sees the cop with this huge cannon, screaming at Ski Mask Guy, and she completely freaks out. Turns out Ski Mask Guy was neighbor's boyfriend or husband doing some sort of roleplay thing at the neighbor's request. At least nobody got shot, and apparently the cop was better known thereafter as Officer Cockblock. 3 a.m. on a weeknight, and I pulled up behind a car at a light. The light is green, and the car is stopped but running. Their foot was on the brake. The light turns red, so I wait behind him. Light turns green again, and this guy just isn't moving. So my partner and I quietly exit our vehicle and approach his. He was completely passed out, asleep, with the car in drive. We woke him up and talked to him to make sure he wasn't drunk, and he was just tired because his wife had had a baby a few days ago and needed him to run to the store for something. That newborn sleep deprivation is real. I find so many suspicious vehicles in our National Veterans Cemetery in my jurisdiction, they almost always turn out to be Pokemon goers. The cemetery in my town has a few stops in it, and usually popping with Pokemon during the day. I'm unsure of why they chose cemeteries as places to do that, but I remember walking through mine and seeing tons of other people, along with one of my high school teachers, all hunting for Pokemon. My dad told me about a time back in the 80s. My father was sitting in his cruiser around the corner from a bar. A car drives by, swerving a little with exhaust coming from the tailpipe, signifying a recently started vehicle. Pulls the guy over, smells alcohol on the driver while also noticing a large staff on the back seat. He has the driver step on it and then inquires about the staff. The driver tells my dad, "I'm a black belt in Kung Fu. I use it in my class." So my father, unconvinced, asked him to demonstrate his proficiency with the staff, while having to prove his sobriety in a sort of impromptu field sobriety test. The driver puts on a little show for Dad on the side of the road. Dad's enjoying the show, but starts to hear sirens coming from all directions. A passerby had seen my dad on the side of the road in a face-off with a crazy man and a stick. Thinking my dad was in need of help, the passerby had called the cops. Apparently my dad had been so wrapped up in the show, he hadn't heard the radio calls for him. So dispatch sent all available units to his rescue. The passerby thought my dad was getting his butt kicked by a ninja. I was briefly apprehended this one time. I wanted to make my father's headstone area look a little better. I thought planting a lavender on either side of the headstone would be nice. Lavender looks really pretty and does well when neglected. In case you didn't know it, you draw a lot of attention at a cemetery when you start digging near a grave with a full-sized shovel. Oh boy, a lot of graveyard-related misapprehensions here. Maybe the traditional small trowel is better for any graveyard renovations our viewers might be thinking of in the near future. And remember, only beautify the graves of people you know. I won't be making that mistake again. Years and years ago, okay, several decades, so I'm old, sue me. This one guy was arrested for arson. A neighbor in a subdivision backing up to the farm saw him methodically move all of the valuables out of the barn over a period of 1 week, then closely mowed the hayfields for about 50 yards radius all around the barn. He was puzzling over the mowing when he noticed the farmer walk all around the barn pouring something from a blue gas can right at the bottom of the barn walls. The neighbor looks away for less than a minute and then looks back at the barn and it's fully engulfed in flames. He calls the fire department and reports the farmer has set his barn on fire with gas or something. The fire department is on scene in about 5 minutes and reports the barn is already beyond saving. They smell diesel fuel. A quick investigation says it's arson. The field is mowed up to prevent spread. The burned barn has nothing much in it, but the other barn and shed overhang has a lot of stuff recently placed with grass underneath still green. Definite marks of petroleum accelerant. They arrest the farmer on the spot and he says nothing. The farmer refuses to talk to the DA and asks for a lawyer. I'm on the jury where the prosecution states they'll prove the farmer set his own barn on fire. The barn was insured and insurance fraud was the motive. They all call the expected witnesses. The neighbor, they play the 911 call, they interviewed the fireman who smelled fuel and saw marks of accelerant on the ground. The defense does no cross-examination at all. The prosecution is done and defense has their turn. Defense calls the farmer and the first question asked is, let's cut to the chase. Did you burn your barn down? Yep. Why did you do it? It was old, rotten, with termites. Gonna fall down. Not safe. Have you always burned down old farm buildings? Yep, and my daddy did it before me. It's a farm. Are you aware that you need a permit to burn debris in this county? Been doing it like that on this farm since we had dangerous engines. Never had no permit. The fine is up to $50. Oh wait, I forgot. You're zoned active agriculture and are exempt, no permit needed. But why didn't you tell any of this to the police? They didn't ask till after they put handcuffs on me and took me to the police station. They told me anything I said would be used against me and said I had the right to remain silent. And then some lawyer guy came in and told me I was going to prison for insurance fraud. I remember Perry Mason said, "Don't talk to anyone but your lawyer." So I didn't. Heh. Did you file an insurance claim? What for? The barn wasn't worth anything in that state and I moved all this stuff out. I suggested we try to talk my client out of this and you said you wanted your day in court. What's up with that? They came on my land, arrested me without telling me what for, told me later it was for arson and insurance fraud, and put that in the newspapers. All of my friends, relatives, and neighbors knew about this. They made me look dishonest. I just want to make sure everyone knows the real facts. I figured this is better than them just dropping it and everyone wondering whether they decided just not to send an old man to prison. The defense rests. It was epic. The jury was sent out of the room and after a few minutes told the case was over and to go back to the waiting room in case we were needed for the next trial. It's my understanding they dropped the case. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm the suspect in this situation. I lived in a large town in the south of the UK in my own terraced house. Outside my bus was a bus stop, so it had a few people who'd go by outside each day, but it wasn't in the heart of the high street. I'd suffered from cluster flies for a few days, and they came out of nowhere. We're talking maybe 50 or so, which is a little alarming, but there was nowhere I could see they were coming from. I got rid of them as quick as they came about, and went about my day as usual. One day of the weekend, I had a knock at the door with riot police who stated they believed that someone had died on the property and they were able to enter under an emergency act of law without a warrant. In their wisdom, they spoke to the neighbors about who lived here after a report from an elderly lady visiting the bus stop. The neighbors had mentioned my ex-girlfriend, who they hadn't seen in a few months. We had broken up and she had moved out, but the police put the flies report and this fact together as me definitely being a killer. The police was sure I had something to hide, as they instantly didn't believe that I owned the house. I work in IT, so I make good money, and am thankful that I saved hard to get on the housing ladder, but they weren't having any of it. I had to then wait under surveillance while my house was searched and riot police were all in the street. I'm a keen gardener, and upstairs in the airing cupboard I was attempting to grow some seeds. The police were convinced that 23-year-old me was instead running what the kids are calling a Mary Jo Wanna factory. In the end, they found no dead body and they realized their mistake when I pointed out the 50 cacti around the house they conveniently hadn't noticed. I'm sure I'm on some kind of list now, but they left almost disappointed that their amazing detective work found an IT nerd that likes spiny flora and not the next big serial killer. In short, the police thought I murdered my ex-girlfriend and that I was running a substance factory in my home. To be fair, if you looked anything like most IT workers, i.e. like me, you probably fit the Jeffrey Dahmer vibe that people can look out for when there's a potential murder at hand. And if you think there's a chance of it, I guess it's good to at least check in. Those popos were a little overzealous though. The first one that comes in mind for me was late at night, saw a guy hauling copper pipe out of a local grocery store after it had closed down. Copper theft at the time was really common, so I thought I had a burglary in progress. I stop out and get ready for an easy arrest. I ask him what he's doing and he says he was hired to clean the place out. I ask why he's taking the copper. The owner told him the payment was the copper piping. Since it wasn't going to be a grocery store afterwards, they didn't need it. I didn't buy that for a minute. Bullcrap detector was screaming at this point. So I find the owner in our records and call him, and sure as heck, the guy was hired to clean the place out and was paid in copper pipe. That was their agreement. But then I asked him why he was out at 2 a.m. since it was super suspicious. Since the place closed down, there was no AC. As it was the middle of the summer, 2 a.m. was the best way to do it and keep cool. Recently, I was conducting an S18 house search on a guy we'd arrested in a local club with loads of substances on him. In his room, I found an oversized, out-of-place vase with false flowers in them, so my suspicion was raised. I took the flowers out, and in the bottom I saw what I believed to be a balaclava. Here we go. I took it out and unfolded it, and it turned out to be a jumper for a small dog. I look in the vase again, and I see a blue velvet drawstring bag. I manipulate it slightly, and it rustles with the feeling of lots of little packets inside. I remove it slowly, open the bag, and inside are some retro Scrabble pieces. The frick? We didn't find any further substances in his room. We did, however, find a big F-off-sized machete under his mattress, wrapped up in a tea towel, so that was interesting. Still confused as frick about the contents of that vase, though. Police officer here. Long story short, guy gets locked out of his house by his wife, and we catch him trying to get back into his house. It was just after midnight, and we got a call of a suspicious person looking into a home. We respond code 2, lights but no sirens, and switch off the lights before we get close to mask our approach. As we pull up to the house, we see no signs of anyone at the front of the house, so we walk around to the rear and bam, guy with a crowbar wrenching on the back door. I yell, "Police! Drop the crowbar!" The guy starts screaming and nearly crying because we scared him so badly. Turns out he went to Tim Hortons to get a coffee as he and the wife had had a few drinks, and he forgot his keys and cell phone in the house. She was so drunk she forgot he left and locked the doors like she does every night. The poor guy tried to wake up his wife and she was passed out and didn't hear him. He grabbed the crowbar from his shed to try and pop the locking mechanism, and we caught him. We managed to get a hold of her by calling her on my cell. When she answered the door, she admitted to accidentally locking him out and gave us the exact same sequence of events. I honestly wish we had body cams so we could replay the poor guy's face and high-pitched scream. So to address a few things. First, our service does not have tasers. We train constantly in advanced hand-to-hand tactics. We're getting tasers soon though. And second, our hands were on our weapons, but after yelling at the challenge and hearing him scream and drop the crowbar, we de-escalated the situation completely. When you hear a door being wrenched on, you know there may be an improvised weapon involved, hence our officer safety and being ready should he charge us. I was on the bus commuting to my university and began to feel extremely bloated. So I decided to get off. Turns out that was a relatively good move because as soon as I got off the bus, I began furiously crapping my pants. And I mean like full-on blasting diarrhea. Of course, it didn't help me avoiding crapping myself, but it helped me not embarrass myself further by turning the bus into a chemical bomb that day. Anyway, what happened thereafter was probably even more embarrassing than crapping myself. After the story above happened, I found myself in the middle of a downtown area of my city, a place where I wasn't familiar. However, luckily I had my phone, so I turned on my location and tried to figure out where I was. Thankfully, I found out I was really close to the Natural History Museum that I visit quite frequently. So I get there and decide to stand on the side of the building where there's this small round area with stone benches. I call my parents, and after having a few laughs, they agree to come and pick me up. However, I'm like 45 minutes away from my house, so it's going to take a while. What I didn't expect is that people were frequently walking past me. Apparently, they found me suspicious. They apparently couldn't smell the radiating stench of humiliation and brown filling the area, and all of these lovely people decided to inform the cops that I was there, and that they suspected I was likely waiting for a substance deal. When the cops arrived and questioned me, this forced me to admit that I did indeed crap my pants, and after they came closer, I think they realized the truth of that. I told them I didn't want to go towards the front of the museum where there was lots of people. Needless to say, I was embarrassed. The cop politely asked if I needed a ride home or a phone call to someone, and I assured them that someone was coming to get me, and they left. Oh, that sucks. I almost wish that some incredible heist had gone down at the museum immediately afterwards, and that you were a prime suspect because of this, with photos of you looking queasy and uncomfortable being posted all over the news. Would have been the cherry on that humble pie you were forced to eat. I was a cop in a cops and robbers game, caught one of my friends eating what appeared to be my snacks, but he just happened to have the same type. Patrolling a military housing neighborhood, I'd noticed a suspicious parked van around the area over the past few nights, always in a different spot, but I could never catch it coming or going. So around the 5th night of this, I hid my car and waited. Sure enough, the van rolls through. I waited a few minutes before following, turn the corner and light up 3 guys rummaging through all the trash cans left on the street. Turns out they were part of CID. Think NCIS, the show, but the army version. They suspected someone in the area was cooking crystal and were going through the garbage cans to find discarded ingredients. I only found this out after getting chewed out after they called my supervisors. I still don't feel bad, nobody told me. I was just starting on the street around the time Pokemon Go was taking off. So many contacts in the middle of the night that were just people trying to catch Pokemon. So I'd be like, "Ma'am, I noticed you're driving in circles around this closed business at 3 a.m.
Yeah, there's a herd of Charmanders here and it's too busy during the day.
Oh, okay, thanks for letting me know. I pull out my phone and open Pokemon Go. Ex-cons. What's the saddest thing you've seen in prison? As a kid, I went to juvie, or kid jail, for accidentally setting some woods on fire. It was a bonfire out of control situation. My cellmate was only a few years older than me. He was a super nice, laid-back guy. We got along great and even sort of became friends while there. I was just a kid, so I didn't really ask any questions about different colors of jumpsuits and people's reasons for being there. The day I got out, I found out he was in there for murder. Apparently, he got really tired of his stepdad bullying him, and he remedied the situation. I never really knew all of the details, but I can tell you that when talking to him, he seemed like a good kid at heart. He had things and people that he cared about, things he wanted to do, interests. The guards obviously must have known, but they were always super nice to him, noticeably so, even more than the inmates. I always wondered what happened to that guy.
A kid like that I don't see as a murderer. He was a kid probably being put in a horrible home situation and didn't know what to do. Kids can't just leave and go find another family. Of course, he committed a crime and should be accountable, but I find it sad when I hear about kids like this. It's like women who kill their terrible spouses who take them prisoner in their houses and stuff. He probably felt safer and more comfortable in prison. I'd be interested in finding out where he is. As for you, young man, setting fires? I really hope you learned your lesson.
I knew a guy who was very kind and in prison for just a parole violation because he stole something. He was a homeless guy, a bit goofy and had schizophrenia or something, but a really nice guy. Anyway, he got sent to Seg for some reason and the guards ended up beating him to death there. I believe the guards who did it are in prison themselves now. Can't believe that happened. Rest in peace, Larry. A 57-year-old man on a life sentence, high on spice, which is a synthetic psychoactive substance, was crawling around on the floor screaming because he could see his dead mother towering over him, looking at him in disgust. Not a pleasant thing to see, especially when you're stuck in a cell with him.
It's a wild herb. Doing the same substance I've mentioned above, a 22-year-old man ended up flooding his cell, setting it on fire and passing away 2 months before finishing his sentence. Another one is where a guy mutilated himself and again set fire to his cell, because the substance made him think that getting hard was evil. So yeah, stay away from spice. Okay, let's add that one to the list of substances that realistically the narrator was probably never going to take anyway. So a little redundant, but on the off chance someone's handing out synthetically spliced green herb at the local bowling club, I know to stay clear. Also, there's some pretty messed up stuff involving self-deletion and a variety of uncomfortable themes coming up, so you've been warned, guys. I mean, it's a video about prison, so go figure. I knew a guy who was never in trouble in his life. He was working in the automotive industry in Michigan and lost his job. He fell behind with child support payments and ended up doing time in jail. His very first night, his 2 cellmates got into an argument because one of them couldn't find his bear claw snack. They finally stopped arguing and went to sleep. Then, in the middle of the night, he was woken up by the guy beating the guy he accused of theft up. His cellmate literally beat the guy to death. Apparently, he had gotten a hold of some kind of pole or stick, and the entire cell was just covered in blood. They ended up finding out that the guy he had accused of stealing didn't steal it after all. I'll never forget the fear and look in that guy's eyes when he told me what happened. I went to county for about a week in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, on a substance charge. I was 19 years old, scared out of my mind. It was a room with about 4 communal picnic benches, and 2 rooms on either side with about 6 bunks on them. I noticed one was full and the other had just one guy there. So, not understanding the situation at all, I went over to the empty bunks and a guy grabbed my shoulder and just gave me a hard look that said no, but without saying a word. I then noticed the other prisoners were camped out in the corners on their mattress. I did the same. Found out not long after that the solo guy was in for a crime against a young person. I've never heard such a beatdown as I heard that night. I just covered my ears and stared at the wall. How did I get here? And the sobbing and pleading? I was bonded out the next day. This was in 1992, my spring break of college freshman year. I was driving out to visit a friend of mine in Wichita. I never had to serve time. This was my first offense, had a good lawyer. I'm a college kid, so I got extremely lucky. Your story is exactly what happened to my ex. We were busted for green herb. He screwed up one of his screens during probation and ended up in county, but for months until a court date. No bond. It was horrible for a number of reasons, but for him, being a laid-back Lebowski kind of guy, listening to a similar character being beaten in the middle of the night was disturbing on a number of levels. Hanging out one day in the law library. All of a sudden, some guy who was fresh came in minding his own business and just started reading something. One of my boys who was also in there, mind you, I'd been locked up for over a year at this point with this guy, and he was chill and in there for dealing. This guy got up, walked over to the fresh guy, and beat the living F out of him. Like, not just knocked him out, I'm saying literally beat the life out of the guy. Blood flying everywhere. The other guy was on the ground and the assailant just kept going. I got up and just stepped back and watched so I wouldn't get jumped by the COs when they came in. They literally dragged his lifeless body away and cuffed the guy I knew. I saw him once before I got out and I asked him what the frick had happened that day. All he said was, "I just kinda felt like messing someone up." Needless to say, I've had serious trust issues since then, and since being locked up in general. Seeing that other guy get destroyed in front of me for no reason was pretty effed. My brother had 3 gold teeth. They were ripped out in the first few months of being in prison. He said he lost them in a fight, but a guard told us that he was probably held down and had them forcefully pulled out, judging by the damage to his gums. A 17-year-old kid was in my block. His name was Israel. He had been kicked out of his grandma's house a few months prior for doing substances, so he was living on the streets. He got picked up for package theft. He was only in for 30 days, but he was enjoying every minute of it, because he was young and a generally good guy and people were looking out for him. I taught him how to play spades. At the end of the 30 days, he didn't want to get out. He didn't want to go back to life on the street with no food. He was planning on doing something to get himself back in there, but I tried convincing him that's not where he wanted to be. I told him he needed to go talk with his grandma, quit doing substances, and try to get a job to help pay her bills and keep him out of trouble so he could get his own place sometime soon. I mean, he heard me, but I doubt he was listening. If I had to guess, he probably got himself locked up again, but I sure hope not. There was a guy whose girlfriend broke up with him while he was inside. So just before he walked out to lunch, he made incisions and ended things. His cellmate had to explain to the officer that he didn't do it, the guy did it to himself. I was working on servery, so I was out of my cell every day, all day. One day I was told by the screw to check on the cells on the ground floor. I opened one of the door flaps, and this guy, he was standing in the middle of the room with his shirt off, crying, then proceeded to make a series of cuts. Called help, and he made it. But not long after that, he strung himself up somewhere anyway. I was serving 3 to 5 years for conspiracy to fraud and aggravated violence. I ended up serving 2 years in Arizona for good behavior and participation. I didn't do it, lawyers screwed me, as said in Shawshank Redemption. I was in with someone, let's call him Carlos, and he was up for a review and serving a dime, and he got a new roomie who tried to clap his cheeks. Carlos felt like he had no chance but to stick him, and he added another 5 years to his term when he was likely going to be free that year. From what we understand, he did tell the guards and review board that he was defending himself from being a victim of the unspeakable act, but not sure what the outcome was other than he added more time. Okay, update. I just asked my boy who stayed in the same block with Carlos about his release date, and Carlos did in fact get out on time in 2017. The roommate who tried to take advantage had a reputation and many other DAs in his paperwork about other such offenses in prison, which came into play for his review. A guy we worked out with found out that his dad went on a spree against his whole family and then jumped off the mortal coil himself. He went to his cell for a while, and after like 40 minutes, he was screaming for help. Stumbled out of his cell in a state that I honestly don't know how he made it into without going unconscious or passing away earlier. Blood everywhere. He didn't make it more than a few steps out of his cell before falling and going unresponsive. This is going to be one of those videos that I don't feel good about for some time, I can tell. I don't know what you can take away from this one, folks. Don't end up in prison if you don't want to see stuff every other week that will haunt you forever, I guess. My ex-boyfriend was in jail for almost 3 years. I used to visit him every Saturday. There were lots of families in there, in the visitation room. Imagine a sort of warehouse with little tables and chairs. There was this woman that would sometimes visit her husband and service him under the table. Sometimes she'd sit on his lap and they'd just not so subtly do the deed, otherwise fully clothed for a while, right next to other family members. I'll never forget those faces, staring at the wall, trying to ignore what their parents or siblings were doing. The guards would mostly just ignore it because the guy was apparently a big-shot dealer and had lots of influence. It was absolutely disgusting and humiliating for everyone involved. My ex would scold me for staring at them with disgust. He didn't want to get in trouble with that guy. It was so messed up. Not as messed up as some of the other stories here, but it broke my heart to see younger relatives in those situations. There was a person who went to prison and cried all the time. He never spoke, but after a while it became clear that the officers forced him to confess that he'd killed a person, otherwise the officer threatened very horrible violence on that guy's family in front of his eyes. He confessed and received a life sentence. We live in a very conservative and corrupt country. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Did my time from 2018 to 22. Being Asian, it's so few of us on certain yards, and I ended up being cellmates with the only other Vietnamese guy on the yard. He was a lifer who was never going home and took me in like a little brother. I usually get a mail from family, but this one time I saw the letter and it was for him. Excitedly handing him the letter, he was in shock that it was for him. As he read the letter, his face said it all, and it was clear that it wasn't a good one. He later tells me that he'd reached out to his uncle to see his mum and dad's whereabouts because they're in Vietnam. His uncle told him to drop dead, how embarrassing he was to the family. They brought him to the US just to F up his life, and that he should never contact them again unless he's getting released. This guy barely spoke any English, and overall was a good guy who made one grave mistake. He had a huge substance addiction that I overlooked until it got out of hand. During count time, we'd have to stand up and show our ID to the COs who were making their rounds. My cellmate would tell me when he's going to load up and shoot up the stuff we had, and I had no problem with it because I'm not one to judge, and this is how it is in prison. As long as I know you're not snooping through my personal belongings, you're respectful to the house and not tampering with my hygiene, everything's good. But this time, as he got squared away, he didn't clean up, and I'd already dozed off before count time happened. 4 to 5 loud knocks and I'm woken up for count time. I jump off the rack and notice my cellmate was literally slumped over the stool, like how you see homeless people who are strung out on smack. The COs know exactly what's going on, but would rather look the other way than typing up a 115 disciplinary report. Anyways, I look over at our table and there it was. The stuff he was taking as well as all the equipment to do so: syringe, cotton, ball and spoon. That alone can land you 5 to 10 extra years in prison, plus dead time in the SHU. After that, I tried explaining to him if he doesn't clean up his act, then I'm going to have to move out of the cell. I want to make it home, and he couldn't let go. Fast forward 2 to 3 months later, friends on the yard are telling me how my ex-cellmate is very sad and hasn't been acting the same since I left the cell. At the time, he had no family support, letters or phone calls, so I'd taken him in, took care of him and let him talk to my mum on the phone, because we're from the same area and Vietnamese. Also that he could have some sense of family. COVID-19 struck the world, and inside prison was an absolute hellhole. We went 4 to 5 months of straight lockdown, no phone calls or mail coming in or out. No clue what's going on, all because the COs are all afraid, calling off work and refusing to take the vaccination. Some were, some weren't. Long story short, my cellmate ended up being patient 0 and had COVID first on the yard. He was completely isolated in a different unit alone with other people who also caught the virus. Typical day in the prison compound, an alarm goes off while we're all in lockdown. Everyone thinks it's a fight breaking out in a different unit. 3 to 4 hours later, a CO comes up to my cell, and I'm thinking it's a cell extraction and I brace myself to get raided. He pulls me out and tells me that my ex-cellmate was found dead. He braided up the bed sheets, looped it between the AC unit, dropped to his knees and started spinning, and eventually passed. My heart broke in half and I cried in the cell. Of course, some people in prison are pieces of crap and made fun of the matter, and I ended up smashing this guy at our break room for making fun of my cellmate's self-deletion, and I ended up with 6 months in the SHU along with extra time for inciting a riot. Additional year along with the dead time of 6 months. I found out that they resuscitated him back to life. He was dead for about 25 minutes and is now in a medical yard that has him on life support for the past 2 years. The state can't pull the plug unless the family gives permission to kill off their loved ones, but they tried to get in contact with him. Too little too late. I pray for his soul and his family's well-being till this day. Rest easy, brother. Life after death will be graceful and may you be reunited with your family when the time comes. I'm an ex-CO. I had an inmate who got some bad news in the form of his mother passing right as it turned Christmas Day. It was midnight and we wouldn't be serving chow for a good long while, and the day rooms were clear of all inmates, so it was a tad odd to have to escort a guy down to the lieutenant's office. I was dismissed as soon as we arrived, and he was sent back alone. This guy was a troublemaker, always acting disrespectful to both us and the other inmates. When he returned, I figured I was going to have hell putting him back in. Instead, he calmly walked back to his cell, never said a word, and didn't even look around. We checked on him multiple times and nothing happened on my shift. Found out when I came back in the next day that he'd finished things in his cell with a towel as a rope while his cellie was at rec and the officers were busy in another wing. I remember the worst part was getting the call to escort him down, because when they called, it had just turned from Christmas Eve to Christmas Day. So for Christmas, he got another night in prison and lost his mother. Had a stint in juvie back during COVID. A 13-year-old girl was the only other person I could talk to since her intake day was the same as mine. Social distancing BS. My god, her story was intense. But to cut it short, she was in there because of a brutal fight with her junkie mum. She had 2 choices: lose her only family member to jail and have to go into foster care, or lie and take the fault so she'd be the one locked up. It genuinely almost brought me to tears. Well, yeah, that girl was better than either of her parents deserved, obviously. I'm 100% certain that her mother was in no way grateful for the second chance she got either. There was a guy on the yard convinced he was going to be transformed into a chicken for his crimes later in life. Crazy, really? I worked in a prison for about 2 years as an administrator. A lot of sad stuff happens all the time. Many times the inmate's family visits turn out into a big shouting event, and the inmate goes back to their room feeling depressed because that was the first time in months they'd seen their family. There was one time where a guy was waiting for his mother and sister to visit him. The family had booked half-an-hour time slot and the guy was in the waiting room. But they never turned up. I actually saw tears in his eyes as the visiting hours were over and he was told to go back. Our prison also conducts GCSE English and math classes for inmates. One of the inmates had been doing a lot of revision and preparing for his GCSEs for almost a year, I assume. On the day of his exam, he heard that his partner had decided he didn't want to be alive anymore, and he was in too much unbearable grief to sit in the exam. He lost his partner, missed his chance to appear in the exam, and lost a bit of his mind as well. There are countless small stories that I've seen which is extremely sad, and when I tell people about these events, there's very little sympathy towards the inmates. 2 things. There was an old Italian man, transitioned from cane to wheelchair in the 4 years that I was there. Hunched over, palsy, half-blind, had BOP paid inmate caretakers to watch over him. Yep, that's a thing in federal prison. It's not inhumane, it's one of the best paying jobs you can have, actually. He was in his early 90s and dying from cancer. The feds would not grant compassionate leave because he'd been an important capo in the mafioso back in the late 70s. And no, I don't remember his name. Then there was this guy, maybe early 30s, probably high-functioning autistic. No friends, because prison is hell if you don't have at least one person to hang with. He spent all of his time listening to Catholic masses on the radio, and all of his free time either walking in the track or in the leisure library, still on the radio all the time. During visitations, his mother, who came every time as far as we could figure out, would pet him, literally pet him, stroking his arm or hair or back. You could tell it was very comforting for both of them. Kinda jealous sometimes, because that sort of contact wasn't permitted except the guards looked the other way for this guy. We all knew he was in there for some pretty horrific crimes, but it wasn't the sort of place some of the others here are writing about, and even if it was, even lower on that totem pole is those who prey on the helpless. And man, was this guy ever helpless. No one felt anything more than pity for him. I wasn't exactly in prison, it was the county jail. I used to have a bit of a drinking problem and landed a DUI. It was a rural-ish Wisconsin county, so like 90% of all the inmates were drunks. One guy we had in there for his 4th OWI, but he had been sober for 20 years. He got it because he had throat cancer and he was spaced out on his pain meds when he got pulled over. The cancer had eaten his larynx away, and he had to use one of those electronic wand voice boxes to talk. There was some mess up involving the paperwork for his cancer meds, so the idiot in charge of the block wouldn't let him have any of them for the first few days. This guy was throwing up all over the place, and the rest of us inmates had to take care of him and clean up after him. Eventually, they got his meds thing figured out, and he did the rest of his time, which was about 2 months. 3 weeks after he got out, we saw his obituary in the paper. We also had a nurse who came around to give everyone their meds in the morning and evening, who quit because the officer in charge of the jail was constantly chewing her out for being too nice to the inmates. She was a really sweet younger lady, I think relatively fresh out of med school. Basically, she thought that we were already at a low point in our lives, so we deserved some kindness. And the officer didn't agree and started giving her a hard time about anything he could. I think the incident with the cancer guy was the last straw for her. I was once stood up for a visit. My friend had booked it and didn't show. So I had to wait in the holding cells whilst everyone else went on their visits. After an hour, a guy from my area came back off his visit looking visibly shaken and upset. He went on to tell me that his girlfriend and mother to his kids had just told him she had terminal cancer. Sadly, she died not long after this. This was like 12 years ago. To make matters worse, the guy's face popped up on my Facebook the other week as he was murdered. Made me think of those kids, possibly adults now, who were parentless. Guy told me after he was arrested that all he could think about were his dogs. Said the police didn't care when he told them that his dogs were home alone, and that he really hopes someone he knows or a neighbor will check on them, but he couldn't get a hold of anyone. It broke my heart. Poor puppies. During COVID, we used to be on lockdown a lot, so phone use was spotty. Anyway, I heard a dude on the phone talking to his people, asking about his mum who had contracted COVID. His people told him she was gone, and he couldn't believe it because he'd talked to her 2 days before. The anguish and the way he broke down while on the phone was sad. He couldn't even stand up anymore. What is the rudest way that a guest desecrated the sanctity of your home? My grandfather's cousin was staying with us for a week. He has a bladder problem and would refuse to wear adult diapers. What followed was him leaving a trail of both number 1 and number 2 when he walked around the house. It didn't take too long for my mother to ask his son to take him back home. All I can say is that if you're leaving little trails behind you, it's time to get off your high horse and into some diapers. My cousin and her daughter, who has Down syndrome, were visiting and staying with me in my home. Her kid pooped in a quilt, and for some reason my cousin rolled it up and shoved it in the closet in the guest room without telling me. I discovered it after they left. It was rolled up pretty good, so I didn't smell it immediately. I only found it because my dog stood in front of the closet and barked non-stop until I came and found it. She was so offended by it and didn't stop barking until it was completely cleaned up. I called her and said, "I found the quilt from your bed rolled up with poop in the closet. What happened?" And she said, "Oh yeah, my daughter had an accident. Sorry." They drank half the $200 bottle of tequila I got my wife for her birthday. Then they filled it up with water so we wouldn't notice. My boyfriend invited a couple of guys over while I was at work because we only have a 1-bedroom apartment and I don't always enjoy sitting there watching the game with them. It was considerate. Anyways, he was asleep and they were gone when I got home since I work the 3rd shift. I noticed my new bathroom mat was discolored and assumed that it was from shoes and didn't closely observe. Anyways, I made him look at it with me when he got up because I was a bit angry since it was new. Upon further observation, we came to the conclusion that before leaving, his friend wiped number 2 all over my new mat. It turned out to be brown finger streaks across the whole thing. I threw that out immediately. The toilet paper was readily available, by the way. They are not allowed in the apartment anymore, and it's weird because they weren't on bad terms. They actually wanted to hang out again. Stole money from our engagement cards at our house during our engagement party. He got mixed in with the wrong crowd and wanted to impress them more than be our friend, I guess. Ugh, he tried to crawl into bed with me while I was asleep with my husband next to me. Creepy and rude. Bold, and completely wrong and bad into the bargain. My God, trying to cheat on your friend is one thing, doing it with him 1 foot away is taking it several levels higher. When a niece came in and immediately stood in front of the TV and changed the channel. She was around 15. There were several people watching it. Most of my friends' kids, aged 7 through 11, have this problem. I tell their parents every single time, this is unacceptable behavior for a civilized human being, and I figure it's better that their random aunt is a bit uppity about it more than every other possible friend and mate that they meet for the rest of their lives thinking that they're a selfish jerk. I had a friend who used to jump onto furniture like lawn chairs and stuff. He claimed he wouldn't break it, but sometimes he did break stuff and he just complained that it's not his fault, but that the furniture was too fragile. Sweetie, John's coming over. Hide all the furniture. So I was away for the weekend and my roommate had some friends over for drinks. Problem is, when he drinks, he often blacks out, which he did before ensuring all of his friends had left. In the morning, he discovers 2 friends stayed the night in my room. Not cool, but at least they didn't drink and drive, I guess. So I'm not initially enraged. But when I finally make it home, I discover blood that is very clearly from a combination period and doing the deed on my duvet cover. Not whoopsies started in the middle of the night puddle, but edge of the bed, on top, smeared around. And we're not party college kids, we're all mid-30s with real jobs and what one might assume is a little bit of respect. They are not welcome back. They let their child punch our brand new TV and laughed as he did it as if it were cute. These kind of people are just accidental parents. I knew one such mum when I was a kid. Her kid literally punched me on the nose in the party, and all she did was sit and stare while someone else's mum had to come rushing in to save the day. Well, that's what my mum told me. Apparently she was like this everywhere, and eventually everyone just stopped inviting her, as she seemed to have no interest in even the slightest bit of parenting. They used my laptop to watch naughty movies, and it ended up with a ton of viruses. Then took a big dump and put almost a whole roll of loo paper into the toilet. Told my nephew his friend was never allowed back. They stole $70, shot up some crystal in my bathroom, dropped lit cigarettes on my carpet, and tried to justify it by saying they cleaned my sink. I had a house guest, invited by a roommate, have a psychotic breakdown. He literally came into all of our rooms, rummaged through our drawers, and left any contraceptives or bedroom toys on top of the dresser or nightstand as if to announce that he'd gone through it all. Johnnies, lubricant, birth control pills, all of those. He found ways to undress himself and walked in on my roommates doing the deed. We kicked him out inside of 48 hours. It should have been sooner. We then changed the locks. We actually all knew this guy and hosted him before, and he was great. We were cleaning house a few months later and found a bag of his curly hairs. Ugh. My 10-year-old distant cousin unwrapped 3 new bars of soap and flushed them down the toilet on the 3rd floor of my house. That night, we turned from dinner to find water dripping from the ceiling on the 1st floor. The 3rd floor bathroom had flooded and the water leaked through the floor, dripped from the ceiling on the 2nd floor, and leaked through to the ceiling on the 1st floor. The whole mess cost thousands of dollars to repair. The kid confessed everything with great glee, and his mother just thought it was the funniest thing. We had 2 couples come in to stay with us from overseas, and one of the couples spent the entire time arguing and getting into massive fights. This included screaming, crying, slamming doors, sulking, the works. For 3 weeks. It was the longest 3 weeks of my life. My friend and her boyfriend came to stay with me once, and they did this the whole time too, and I mean, they fought over everything. I think my favorite part is when her boyfriend started crying hysterically and locked himself in the bedroom because he slipped and fell when he got out of the pool, and my friend didn't comfort him enough. My mum welcomed a faraway cousin or someone into our house. He walked into the kitchen where my dad was sitting watching TV and said, "Who the F is this?" I had a party at my house one time, and some guy was being a sack of crap, so I told him to tone it down. He asked me, "Who the frick are you?" And I told him, "You're in my house. Who the frick are you?" Oh, I forgot this one. A friend of a relative stayed with my parents for a week. The guy was Argentinian, late 50s. He was very old-fashioned, religious and stuff. For example, he even told my parents that it was wrong that I was living with my boyfriend without being married. One day he asked my mum to use her PC to check his email. He was in there for quite a while. Right. You guessed it, he was watching smut. But I guess he didn't remember the website he wanted, because he first Googled in Spanish, "young ladies with dark hair having relations," and a few variations of that. My mum found all of that in her internet history, called him out. He tried to blame my then 16-year-old brother, who had his own PC and speaks mostly English, wouldn't have Googled in Spanish. Add to the fact that said brother was away on a camping trip. He wasn't welcomed back. My ex-girlfriend got absurdly drunk at my grandmother's funeral and then got into a screaming match with my brother and dad in the front yard. Male friend asked that my partner and I take ourselves and our under 12-month-old daughter to a motel for a night whilst he uses our house to try his luck with one of our female friends we invited for game night. I had a collection of $1 casino chips, one from every casino I'd been to. A housemate invites some people over, and a guy sees them sitting somewhere and just starts playing with them. I figure the guy likes to fidget, so it's no big deal. He ended up taking a bunch of mismatched casino chips, and apparently even tried buying a drink at the bar with them. Luckily, one of the other guys he went out with got them back to me, but seriously, who does that? I had people over at my apartment, and somebody's friend upper-decked my toilet. Oh boy. If you don't know what upper decking is, Google it, but steady your stomachs and don't image search because it involves number 2. In any case, this is a bad thing to do, but how bad determines whether you're a student at a party. For that, it's probably borderline par for the course if you're in a frat or something. Gross, and I hate it, but one of the ups and downs of college or university life. It's wild if you're over 30. I was babysitting my neighbor's daughter. My neighbor was supposed to pick up the girl hours before and didn't answer any of my messages prior. I got the living room ready just in case she was going to stay the night. It was close to midnight and he finally comes to pick her up. The dad rang the bell and when I answered the door, he was so wasted. He barged in and walked past me to go to the kitchen and everything that was in his grasp he literally destroyed. He went to the fridge and drank juice straight from the carton. He then walked back to the living room where his daughter was and shouted random crap at her, and mid-sentence he threw up all over my couch and passed out. For those of you asking, yes, he did apologize and pay to clean the couch. The daughter at the time had just started first grade, so she was probably 6 or 7. She's very smart, so she was definitely aware of what was going on. And did I call CPS? Yes. He turned out to be an alcoholic, and it wasn't the first time he had done that. This was in my car rather than my house. I don't have many rules for passengers when I'm driving, but there are 2 I will never budge on. First, wear your seatbelt. Second, don't smoke in my car. I just bought the car. It wasn't brand new, but I knew the previous and only owner, and I knew he was a car guy who took meticulous care of his cars inside and out. He wouldn't even sell me the car before he'd given the engine a proper service. Within a week of getting the car, a friend asked for a lift to the train station. I knew he smoked, so as we walked to the car, I told him specifically to wait until we get to the station before he lights up. A 10-minute ride at most. I back out of the parking spot, drive to the exit of the parking lot, and as I check my left-hand side for oncoming cars, I hear from my right the distinctive sound of a lighter sparking up. The guy couldn't even frickin' wait until we were out at the frickin' car park before he just had to have his goddamn cigarette. I asked him what the hell he thought he was doing, and he just looked at me and says, "Relax, it's not like it's a new car." Motherfricker ended up walking to the train station. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. She let her dog, who was on a leash, pee on me and continued talking to finish her thought before taking him outside. She also didn't help clean it up. And you didn't interrupt with, "What the frick is wrong with you?" Based on some of these answers, a lot of people would watch their entire family be tortured to death without saying a word. I was going to post about a time I was really angered by friends of friends staying and emptying our fully stocked bar fridge and then emptying the wine fridge, which was also stocked, and a random bottle of Bailey's. None of these things go together. Heathens. They didn't offer to replace any of it. and made themselves completely at home and even invited guests over to view, quote, their place. But in reading some of these others, I'm starting to feel much better that no substances were involved. Maybe it's time for me to let that grudge up. My really close friend bought his now ex-girlfriend that was super controlling over, while me and a few other friends were hanging out. About 30 minutes in, she decided that she's going to go into my super white bathroom and dye her hair black. Not only this, but if you've never dyed your hair before, you must rinse your hair out to get excess dye out. She ended up staining my white counters, bathtub, shower, floor, 2 decorative bowls, my carpet outside the bathroom, and my toilet. I was just so irate, and I don't think she understood that you don't do this crap in someone else's house without asking them. Literally everyone that was over, including me, told her to get her now just showered, undressed butt out of my house. I was so done because she just stained so much stuff that won't come out easy. It makes my blood boil thinking about it now. A few friends and I were having some drinks last summer when a guy we know showed up at my house uninvited with a friend of his who was so drunk he immediately passed out on my couch. This now sleeping guy drove both of them to my house. Ugh. The guy continues to get plastered and do some smack, complained about the music we were listening to, and kept trying to put his own terrible punk band on. He cornered my wife and demanded she change her shirt because he has beef with the singer in the band on her shirt, and refused to sit in anything other than a broken chair that we had put in another room when he went to the bathroom. Then complained when it was 6 a.m. and we said we were going to bed, angrily waking his drunk friend up and saying, "I guess we're getting kicked out." Then they both left in the drunk dude's car. They stole $100, but the story has a happy ending. When I was young, I had 3 friends over, all of them brothers. The oldest was my age, the middle was a couple of years younger, same age as my brother, and they'd brought their youngest brother with them. He was a little beehole. Well, that day, my dad let me hang on to a $100 bill because I thought it was cool and had never seen one. I showed it off to my friends and left it on my side table. I didn't even notice it go missing. Well, here's how the story goes. My friends had left, and when they got near their house, the youngest brother pulled out the $100 and said, "Hey guys, look what I took." The 2 older brothers got mad. They dragged him crying all the way back to my house, handed me the $100 that I hadn't even realized was missing, and forced him to apologize. Friends of integrity right there. My guests told their children, ages 4 and 8, that they could put their feet with their shoes up on our furniture. The justification was that we let our dogs get on the furniture, and my husband told them no feet on our furniture previously, and this had teed the parent off. Yes, my dog outranks you and your kids. Get over it. They picked up my very small poodle, held her on her back with 2 hands over a 10-foot balcony. If my dog would have even wriggled, she would have fallen to her death. My buddy came down for a week, and I offered to let him stay at our house so that he didn't have to pay for a hotel, much to my wife's dismay. I told her it would be no big deal, but boy was I wrong. At dinner the second night, he spilled beer all over my carpet, and his only pair of pants. Seriously, what grown man only brings 1 pair of pants on a trip? So I lent him a pair of pants to wear while his are in the washing machine, and that night he got so drunk that he peed all over himself and my couch. And to top it off, after he left in shame, I found my equally soaked pants that I'd let him wear stuffed under the couch. Maybe the guy wasn't doing so well financially for all I know, but when you cause that much damage, you really have to own up, and if you're able, pay for whatever cleaning needs to be done. Accountability, folks. You'll be embarrassed, but it cuts off about 90% of the future shame and judgment if you own up to it. I had a friend visit once, was in the area on the way to something else. I had a ferret at the time. Ferrets tend to bite. I always warn people. He bit her under the arm and she grabbed him and threw him to the ground. I reacted calmly but tell her off to some degree, and she then asks if she can take him to show some other friends she's meeting up with. Like, what the hell is wrong with people? You just showed me you can't even handle him in the house. You think I'm going to let you take him out in public? We had a party at our house. The guests ended up using the bathroom in our bedroom as well because of lines to the guest toilet. We've had one of those only attached to the wall and no legs to support sinks on top of a long, slim shelf kind of thing. A guest sits on the damn thing and broke it. I was beyond belief at how someone could sit on something that looks, feels, and very obviously shows it's not made to carry weight and is not supported. We now have one with legs. When I was living with my ex, who was an alcoholic and had a lot of mental issues, one of his friends from his past asked to stay over for a day or 2. They drank. Like, a lot. I woke up in the middle of the night with the friend standing in our bedroom peeing against the bedroom window. When I woke up my ex, he didn't think it was that big of a deal. That's the day I packed my stuff and left. Kid tried to cut my birthday cake and open my presents. The kid was 8 and I was 6. The whole time his mum was laughing like it was some joke. I was frickin' mad. I looked at the mum and she was like, "Oh, Jonathan, don't do that, sweetie." And this frickin' kid kept going. I grabbed him and the mother effer was fighting me to open my presents. I'm not even exaggerating. He just had to see what was inside. He then tried to cut my cake and told his mum to get the knife because he was ready to cut the cake. What annoyed me the most was that none of the parents did anything. My mum was in the kitchen, so she couldn't see what was happening. They all just sat there watching it happen. It was only after I was like, "F this, I'm done, I don't care anymore, it's ruined," did my aunt do something. She didn't see it happening earlier either because she was helping my mum. Mum's cousin visited with a friend. Cousin and friend were early 20s, old enough to be decent house guests. Mum ordered takeaway for the adults and put fish fingers and chips in the oven for us kids. Before the takeaway turned up, the guests decided they were hungry and ate the fish fingers without telling anyone. Mum opened the oven to find a tray of chips and an empty tray where the fish fingers would have been, and had to put on more so that the kids wouldn't go hungry. It seems small now, but who the heck eats a child's dinner when theirs is less than 10 minutes away? A friend of mine demanded that my dad give her his iPhone charger. Not to borrow, to keep. He politely declined and she huffed out, muttering about how he was too old for an iPhone anyway. He was 49 at the time. She now wonders why he doesn't talk to her. Came over for lunch, assumed they'd be spending the night at my place, and got mad when I told them that the invitation was for lunch only. Ah, family. Not in my house, but my uncle's. My brother and his now ex-girlfriend were over at my uncle's house watching a movie. From what I was told, my brother had his girlfriend laying down on his lap and he was plucking her armpit hair out and putting it on the couch. Not frickin' flushing the goddamn toilet. Insisted on making dinner, burned the steaks. Insisted on making hamburgers. I told him I didn't like onions, so made the hamburgers with chunks of onions. I tried to eat one, but chunks of raw onions is not something I want to eat. He made beans in a crock pot but didn't refrigerate them overnight. Just left them out in the crock pot, plugged it in the next morning and let them cook all day the second day. Claimed if there was any bacteria in there, cooking killed it all. Repeated for a week. My spouse and I ate the beans the first night and refused any leftovers. We had record heat for days on end, so we ran the air conditioning. He would not quite shut the door to the outside, leaving a small crack to let the cool air out and his smoking in. Every time I passed by, I'd shut the door until it latched. And worse, we had indoor-only cats and they'd occasionally escape because he couldn't understand that the door needed to stay shut. He left open potato chip bags in the pantry, and it wasn't any one thing, although food poisoning and endangering the cats was pretty close, it was the conglomeration of a lot of little things. This girl I hadn't seen in years showing up to my parents' house unannounced. I was so happy to see her. So she came home with me and we ate dinner and caught up on life. She stayed the night since it's so late. And the next day she confessed she was just released from jail and had nowhere to go. We tried getting rid of her for weeks. Then one day we stopped in Walgreens for something and she stole stuff. After that, my grandpa told her to offer favors to a trucker if she had to, but she was leaving no matter what. I dropped her off at the train station and she called me 20 minutes later, but I refused to answer. Haven't heard from her since. What's the worst case of rich brat syndrome that you've ever seen? I worked as a bouncer at a high-end nightclub. The biggest moron of a rich kid, straight out of Malibu's Most Wanted, gets a VIP booth and bottle service. Racks up a massive bill trying to act like a baller. His credit card gets denied and he has to call his dad to come down at 1:30 a.m. because he can't order any more bottles. His dad comes down in his pajamas, obviously ashamed and furious at this D-bag of a kid, ends up embarrassing the crap out of him in front of his whole group of friends. He takes the kid's keys and is about to leave when the kid makes some crappy comment and goes back into the club. The dad's about to walk away after he apologizes for his son when we offer to drag him out the rough way. Dad smiles and accepts. That kid hit every door and every step on the way out. That was one of my most satisfying experiences working at that club. Don't know if this qualifies as rich kid syndrome, but when I got out of the Navy, I decided to use my GI Bill at one of the Penn State satellites. I was sitting in the cafeteria drinking coffee and typing up a paper when a girl sits down across from me and opens up her backpack. She pulls out a sandwich bag and looks at it in disgust and then looks me dead in the eye and says, I don't even know why I bother. My mother never cuts off the crust. I let out one of those high-pitched, short laughs like, is this girl for real? And oblivious to the tone of it, she says, I know, right? Then asks me if I want it. I looked around thinking I was getting pranked or something because this crap is too stereotypical to be real, and I just assumed I was being filmed. She shook it at me and gave me a, well, look. So I said, screw it, and took the sandwich. She then pulled out her student ID card and brought a crap ton of French fries. That sandwich was awesome. I think the bread was homemade and it was stacked like a dagwood. It had all kinds of expensive-looking meats and Dijon mustard, serious gourmet stuff. I know this girl's mother will never see this, but I just want to say someone appreciated that sandwich. A 12-year-old family friend got an iPhone XS for his birthday, then deliberately shattered his iPhone 8. In high school, a kid was bragging that he got in his third fender bender in his old car. It was only 3 years old. His parents had given him that, but he hated it, so his parents were buying him an entirely new, current-year car to incentivize him to drive better. Ugh. I need to say first off the bat that this is about my best friend, and she is the best person I know. Like, not normally rich brat or anything like that. I was complaining about how I was short on money one month, I just couldn't go out to eat, because I had to pay rent and pay for tag renewal all in the same paycheck. She looked at me super seriously and was like, oh, don't worry, they send you the tags in the mail for free. And after a long discussion, she learned that in fact, her mum had been paying for her new tags every year. Yeah, there are entitled rich kids who decide that mummy and daddy's money makes them better than everyone else, and then there are people like this. Not especially mean or bad, and from your testimony, really nice. Just a bit sheltered from some of the aspects of the world by it all. Bless them. Hopefully they use all that privilege to make a positive difference in the world. Oh, this one wasn't too bad, and it is a bit funny as well. I became friends with a kid whose family was really well off. He was a nice bloke, but a bit sheltered, and university was the first time he really had any independence. But he had very little sense of what the value of $1 really was, since his folks got him what he usually wanted, compared to what normal people would spend. There was one particular time he wanted us to eat at a restaurant, and he assured us, it's really good. So we all rocked up to this place, and the price for main courses started at $40 to $60, which, as poor uni students, we couldn't afford. But when he realized this, he was so embarrassed he got his folks to pay for it. He's finally wised up a few years later once he got more independence away from his family and made his own money. He remains one of the best guys I know. My mum's friend used to buy new clothes each season and throw out the old ones. She had to be taught by her husband to save them for the next year. This was way back in the 50s. Her family was very rich, and he was just a normal guy. Worked with this kid who was a good guy, but completely disconnected from financial reality for most people. He'd just moved out west from another state and was trying to get on like a normal adult. He went to buy a new car and was shocked that they couldn't just bill his dad for it since they didn't know him. He ordered a bottle of wine at a restaurant and the sommelier said, "Certainly, sir." Then the sommelier whispered, "Just for your knowledge, sir, the bottle is $700. He looked straight at the guy and asked, "Is that a lot?" The sommelier honestly didn't know how to answer. Good kid, and he got a lot better, but he just didn't know. Once he casually told his mum he needed some help with bills, and she just deposited 20 grand into his bank account. My parents had a dilemma because they both bought each other new Mercedes for Valentine's Day. A guy looked at my $2,000 Beta car in college and commented that it must have been really cheap and guessed $15,000. For anyone curious, it was a Kia Rio 2005 with 120,000 miles on it. I'd have offered to sell it to him as a demolition car or something for that price. I worked at a Starbucks and we hired a new guy who I was training. At one point, I had to show him how to clean the restrooms. I grabbed the bleach and handed him a pair of gloves, and he looks at me in disgust and says, "We don't have a maid to clean the bathrooms?" He quit the next day. Oh, so many entitled rich kids in my life to choose from. When I was in boarding school, one of my co-boarders handed me some mail saying, "Do you notice anything special about this envelope?" And when I checked it out, I realized his face was on the stamp. He was royalty. Then there was the kid from Taiwan, also attending the same boarding school. My advent calendar had little chocolates, his had a remote control car, a Sega Game Gear, and a few other things. Another teenager, age 16, was arguing on the phone to his grandfather that he didn't want a Porsche, he wanted the Ferrari. Went to a destination wedding in Mexico resort. Rich kids rented a golf cart, tore through the streets and flipped the cart, injuring people and causing a huge commotion and traffic jam. A Mexican lady comes out and begins to scold them for their behavior. "You wouldn't act this way at home." And the rich kid responds, "Oh, I promise you, we do." It was the earnestness of his reply that got to me. He really believed he was placating her with that response. There's got to be a German word for something being funny because the other party is aloof to their own behavior. I knew a girl whose allowance was $90 a day. She got into trouble, so they cut it to $90 a week. How old was she? I'm assuming this was high school. How did she manage to spend $30K a year? Well, she was a teenager. She lived in Manhattan, so that explains a little bit at least. One girl from my high school got chest implants for her 18th birthday. Her mum joined her as a mother-daughter bonding activity, followed by the daughter getting a brand new 90 grand Mercedes as a high school graduation gift. Went to high school with this unsufferably spoiled kid. Family had a couch in their home's elevator, and classical European sculpture. This was in the US. The kid talked down to and about the less fortunate on a regular basis, once made fun of me for picking up a coin off the ground. I work for a dentist and her son is a spoiled brat. He was at the office one day because she had to bring him into an appointment later that day. He got bored and went out wandering around some of the local shops. He came back a little while later and without any preamble, he walked up to her and said, "Give me $80. She asked him what it was for and he just repeated himself, so she gave it to him. He was 17 at the time of this incident. The father is in the picture, but my boss, the dentist, is the main breadwinner and disciplinarian of the family. The husband is more like another of her children and just works here and there and lives off her money. She tries to act tough and instill certain morals and values in her kids, but then turns around and caves to all of their demands. For example, her twin daughters are going to university next year, and instead of staying in a dorm, they demanded a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. They refused to share a bedroom or even a bathroom. At first, she told them absolutely not, but they whined and complained, so she caved. This will be a 2-bed, 2-bathroom apartment in Toronto, by the way, where rent prices are through the roof. My boss is very much about appearances, and from a young age, she got her kid accustomed to a privileged lifestyle. She created monsters. And yes, for those of you writing in, they are totally like Jean-Ralphio and Mona Lisa Saperstein. That family sounds pampered as hell, and I think those kids are gonna be monsters. I shudder at what money is doing to those people, but I do appreciate you pointing out how close they are to the worst people in Pawnee, Indiana. This is pretty tame, but it's what I've got. I used to work as an after-school babysitter for a loaded doctor with a couple of kids. My job was mainly to pick up the younger kid from school and hang out until his parents got home. He was a good kid, but coddled and immature. He was in 5th or 6th grade at this point. Oftentimes, he'd not be at his classroom when I came to get him, and the school campus was huge. Different buildings, courtyards, playgrounds, the works. If he wasn't at his classroom, I had to comb the whole campus, and he was rarely in the same place twice. He had a cell phone, but usually ignored its existence except for playing games on it in the car. The school was in the city, and I had to park on the street. A couple of times I wound up with parking tickets because, despite having stuffed the meter with enough quarters to presumably result in ample time, the search for my charge would take much longer than anticipated. After a point, I mentioned this to him, calmly asking that he respect my time and stay in a set location so that I don't end up with a $25 ticket again. He looked at me with a good-natured shrug and said, "Well, that's not much. You can afford that. Sonny, your parents paid me $140 a week and I was in college. I know you live in a $1.4 million house and your dad buys you an expensive new toy every Sunday, but with the money they're forking over for your education, someone ought to have taught you the value of a dollar bill by now." But honestly, he was a nice kid. They've moved away and I hope he's doing well. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This kid in high school was whining, and I mean literally whimpering, that he had to wait something like 6 weeks for his custom-built BMW to come over from Germany. A friend of mine inherited a lot of money, enough to buy a house, and he spent it on 2 cars. A Subaru completely modded to Ken Block's version of it, and some BMW, both of them extremely expensive. We asked him a few months later why he didn't buy a house with it because he still lived with his parents. So he told us he already owned a penthouse, he just didn't want to move yet. I wonder what happens to people like him. Does he sustain his lifestyle? Does he just die off because he did something stupid? I believe somewhere I read a theory that family money usually lasts 3 generations. The first one starts it, the second one maintains it, and the third one blows it. Oh, I could absolutely survive on my own. My parents just pay for my food and house, but I pay for everything else. If I got a job, I could pay for my food and house too. They said at 18 in the middle of a discussion between 2 middle-class peers who were talking about saving money because they had to pay for their own college and living expenses. About 5 minutes prior to this conversation, both peers had ordered the cheap dinner options and declined a shopping trip later that night, while Rich Girl was talking non-stop about buying the best and most expensive souvenirs for her friends. They once tried working a regular person retail job and quit within a couple of weeks as it just wasn't right and I didn't like it. Read, it gave them actual responsibilities for the first time. They moved cross-country for an 8-month education course where her parents paid food, rent, and school. They also gave her a debit card which replenishes up to $500 when it hits 50. She still posts Snapchats with the captions of "that broke person life" over pictures of her getting Starbucks every day, and insists that she could survive on her own. Constantly suggests the most expensive options for meals, activities and stuff, and then tacks on things like, "Oh, we can just split the bill. I know you're saving, but it's just," and then the amount is at least $50. "You'll be fine, right?" Then she gets upset when people can't afford to spend time with her, or when someone dares to suggest that she help cover costs. That is surreal. It's like her affluence hasn't taught her how to live among the lesser fortunate and make her seem super cheap. I've only known one rich kid syndrome, but he too was super cheap and manipulative when it came to money. Some of the most generous people I know are the most poor. They know what it means to share, because if it wasn't for the kindness of others, sharing with them, they could have died. Friends got a theater with an arcade built over their family's 12-car garage. The parents didn't want the 5-year-old sister to be jealous, so they hired an architect to design and build her a functioning playhouse with a bathroom, AC, and a bedroom. That was just the tip of the iceberg with this family, though. I'll try to round out the image, and for what it's worth, no, neither I nor my family are rich. We just lived really close to the family, and my dad and mother became close friends with them. They were, on the whole, really nice and innocent people drunk on the spoils of wealth. I can say I genuinely love the family. Firstly, these are not normal rich people, these are ultra-rich. Probably richer now than they were then. For example, George Bush Jr. visited the family house to hold a fundraiser for his second campaign. The father built a mini racetrack for his Lotus Esprit at his lake house. Also, a mega yacht with a garage for what most of us would consider a large boat on it. Surprise, he never really used the boat more than once or twice. It was an impulse purchase. The house, more aptly called a castle, was filled with game from African safaris taken in the 70s and 80s. The wife bought a popular fast food franchise unavailable in our area because she didn't like having to drive 30 minutes to get what she wanted. Once when I was swimming in the waterfall pool with the son, my mum called and reminded them I need to be home for some sports evening or something, and we hopped in their Bentley, dripping wet. It was the first time my feet ever touched a fur floor in a car, soaking wet at that. At the Millennium, the father was into tattoos and regularly spent tens of thousands to fly the best tattoo artists in the world in from Japan and LA to work on his Yakuza-style sash tattoo. I could go on and on. But the number one thing that I think might qualify one in the family for rich kid syndrome is that the father who inherited his family business from his father sold the business overseas in the late 80s. The company was the only reason that town had to exist. Ever since, the community has been recognized as the most depressed in the state, and the schools unequivocally the worst. My fiance's cousin. He managed to crash 4 cars while still in high school because his father would just replace them. When he moved into college, he got kicked out of several apartments for owning dogs when they weren't permitted. He told me he didn't care though, since his father also funded his continuous stream of new housing. From what I last heard, his father is now paying for his long-standing white snow habit. Knew this one guy at my college who didn't understand why everyone was so worked up about the student loans. I remember him saying something along the lines of, "Why don't people just pay the tuition up front?" He was also quite sheltered. Haha. Well, at least the one thing that people of any wealth or background have in common is that when they have an overwhelming opinion of their own intelligence on the matter, they'll try and solve complex problems prefaced with the words, "Why don't they just?" When I hear those words, I immediately know that I'm likely to hear a take that will make anyone remotely educated in the subject at hand faceplant. I wouldn't say rich kid, but definitely spoiled brat who thought he was rich. Befriended him in 5th grade over our interest in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game.
First time I hung out at his place, I noticed just how littered with stuff his room was, some of it even unopened. I showed him some rare card that I'd recently pulled from a pack. He got super jealous and angry that I wouldn't trade or sell it to him. He immediately got up and walked over to the family computer and booted up a site where you could buy cards and various other toys and such. Completely ignoring having me over, he's now on an online shopping spree, adding stuff to the cart. After adding a few things, he yells, "Where's the credit card?" And immediately his older sister comes running up the stairs to yell, "Kyle, Mom said no more buying stuff online," and closes the website and shuts off the computer. Kyle then proceeds to have a crying tantrum on the floor, and I'm just standing over there in shock at what's happening and how he's acting. I slowly stopped hanging out with him until completely avoiding him as his temperament got worse. Kid wasn't even rich either, if I remember correctly. Both of his parents were cops. I have a teenage cousin who made fun of me because I can't and won't drop $1,000 on Yeezys. Babysat some rich kids. A couple of gems were when we were watching a movie and she said somebody was ugly because they were poor. Another was that they left their stove at the side of the road for hobos. This kid was 11. Look, I have no issues with things being set out at the side of the road, and I wouldn't hesitate to grab something and leave things out myself. It was the hobo thing that irked me. I went to school with a crazy rich kid. His parents divorced and each decided to buy his love. Mommy owned a real estate agency, so she got him a license and spoon-fed him enough sales for a 6-figure income. Then Dad bought him a magazine. Yes, the dad bought a magazine for his 24-year-old white snow-addicted son to run. That worked out about as well as you'd imagine. I have a cousin like that. Her parents have always just bought her whatever job she's kind of interested in. In high school, they opened a Dairy Queen so she'd have a place for her first job. They've bought her a clothing store and an interior design business/home decor store. And now that she's got kids and less time to work, they bought like 4 condos for her to use as Airbnb properties. The only good thing is when she gets bored. Her stepbrother takes over and finds qualified people to run the businesses, so other people are ending up with nice jobs. So my best friend's wife teaches at a ritzy $40,000 per year private school, as in $40,000 a year for elementary and middle school. I think the high school is like $50,000. Well, she teaches 7th or 8th grade, I can't remember, and she said she always goes around the class after the summer break and asks them what they did over the summer, and she particularly remembers one kid complaining about how much his summer sucked because he was stuck on his parents' yacht all summer and they didn't even take it anywhere cool, just Italy. One of my college classmates wrecked his Range Rover over winter break and came back in an Aston Martin. Whenever a young celebrity posts a picture of a house they just bought, "That house isn't nice, my cousin's house is way nicer." This girl would always brag about how she's been to every continent except Antarctica, and she's visited so many countries. Then she wondered why people call her the rich kid and insisted she wasn't even that rich. The guy buys $500 headphones from a vending machine because he lost his old pair. Like, who buys from a frickin' tech vending machine impulsively? It was in a university campus, not an airport, and the guy bought Beats, so not audiophile or noise cancelling. I was tossing the football in my friend's place and we almost hit his expensive TV. His response was, "Don't worry, Dad'll just buy me another one." Luckily, the only rich kids I knew were the most outstandingly well-behaved boys I've ever met. I was a youth leader in a ministry for middle schoolers, and I think the worst it ever got was them being mildly disruptive at times. But these kids had a literal half-sized basketball court in their basement, along with a basement the size of a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment, an arcade, a fully stocked second fridge, and don't even get me started on the house itself and the yard. This place easily zestimated between 1.4 to 1.9 million in 2019. But the next most expensive house I found in the area was listed for 1.4 million. The average home in this particular town costs between 400 and 500k, so it's still pretty lavish compared to what everyone else around them has. But they'd share it with all the kids in the group and never ever look down on anyone for not having money like them. These boys even helped me change a flat tire on my car because they felt like it was useful to know how. They literally could probably afford a tow truck and a tire repair all in the same day if it ever happened to them. They were so well-grounded that it made me feel like I was the spoiled brat at times. In middle school, we were asked to draw our homes for some assignment and hand it in at the end of class. A popular, extremely wealthy kid that sat behind me raised his hand and smugly asked the teacher for another sheet of paper because he couldn't draw it all on one page. His friends just snickered, but I was cringing.
Even at 12, I remember thinking it was such a snobby thing to say. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.